Okay, so this is going to be a continuation of the time travel program. I ended off with being brought to KKK camps and other things, waterfall. So I'll go into another waterfall area. The 80s kids, some of them, a group of 12, were brought to a waterfall. That was not quite a waterfall, but it was in a ghost town off of a drive-through road. And this woman who looked kind of like a drag queen, dragon lady, brought us there. She was even uncertain of what would happen at that point. A little kid was with us in the group, very special little kid named John. He had been fighting behind the red barn. There was a big, huge red circular barn earlier. He was fighting with kids there, and they brought us to the spot as some sort of way to program the black sun into our eyes. So I had on this long sweater, and we went underneath the waterfall, and we were just mortified when this lady dumped out this black bucket of oil into our eyes because we were resisting the programming. So she literally just dumped oil into our eyes. So I grabbed a hold of John to hold him because I thought I was going to go blind at that moment. When the water got into our eyes, it hurt our eyes. Me and John were just, at that point, we were very proud because we always said that we had these eagle eyes that could see very sharply. And the programmers didn't like that about us. Because sometimes we would just go into our own little world. We could stand together and feel like we were seeing visions together, and like we were eagles flying through this primal light field of these golden speckled rays. And we would just be spirit filled, and we would heal each other in these visualization sessions together. So we were like a powerhouse together that they couldn't separate ever. And they even showed it in Maniac where they couldn't separate the two of us. So we ended up crying outside, hugging each other because our eyes didn't glow anymore. We didn't have this like glow to them. We called each other's eyes like not only eagle eyes but angel eyes. And they felt like they had been damaged then at this point by this fluid. So it caused like this aberration or mutation to happen in our eyes. It's like a filter was put over them, and it was this heavenly dampening, like blanketing type sensation that made our eyes feel damaged at that point. We couldn't see clearly. Everything was kind of like blurred colors. And it felt like a black goo holographic chains coming out of our eyes too. Which also happened with the Andromeda strain, 1971, which was also a virus, what I called the vessel virus, got lost. And much like these later created machine babies, they also carried it too, which I'll get into later. The creations that these programmers created in the AI, like the machine babies, were checkpoints later. And they made versions of us and tagged us even astrally and sent them out at certain points to trip us up. So many bodies got corrupted from these, the stolen DNA, that they stole DNA from certain families. They made creations out of certain DNA. They made actor clones out of a lot of certain families' DNA. And they tried to do a lot of things and abuses with the time travel program with the DNA and creating. And some people they could not clone, so then these people would end up operating in a different body each time, a different clone body, not their image of their body. So those corrupted bodies caused dual thought patterning that intended to blur reality streams with artificial ones like a lens. They used John and his brilliant mind for making movies and songs like Maniac, the A&O again, the OA characters. But we maintained a love through many, many times in histories. So we overcame Sylum Springs, Arkansas, the Masonic village that was there, and time travel tech wars with the Freemasons that were there. They were doing rituals inside with children. They were electrocuting children inside the mansions there. They were throwing children off of porches there. There was UFO activity there. There were children that died in the creek trying to run away from there. There was children being trafficked in the motels in Sylum Springs. And there's Masonic markers which brag about these activities. Then kids were taken away in black cars on these little bridges that were there. They made abominations. They made a humanzee, these Satanist freaks, MIB type people that drove around in a black limo, which is a human and chimpanzee creation. And they even had it on a chain. They had a diaper on it. They threatened me and John with it. They told me that his soul was in there. He was looking at it from inside of the humanzee's eyes, and we could communicate like that effectively. He told me, it's okay, I don't feel anything, it's not me. So I heard that in the spirit. I had a courage rush upon me. I actually ended up choking the humanzee and running from these people. These people ended up breaking my legs. Got sent to another blue barn building with some other programmers. Got put in a wheelchair. Went to a pain clinic. Animals healed my legs. I witnessed children being threatened to be put in sewer systems there if they didn't go down the hill and get into the cars that would come and pick them up. There was bags on the bushes. They're like a stick that the car would pull up. They would grab the bag, they would grab the child, and every exit in this village was pretty much blocked off. A lot of these kids were put through Project Surrogate. Their births were unnatural. They were genetically enhanced. Then it started kind of ramping up the time travel program after Sylum, and this gypsy camp that they brought us to that we'd go under the stone arch, and then it would be a portal that we would fight to not go through it, because they would say that they were telling us our fortunes and telling us what our futures would be, and we were supposed to act like little gypsy witches at this camp. So we go to a place called Noel, and this was the early 1900s, and it was controlled by a group of Dracos that were in these little houses on the hill that were. So then what happened is that in this scenario, I found out the one leader and went into this little brick house where he had like stashed bones. He had sacrificed things on a long stone mantle. That place was eventually burned down, and they couldn't hide anymore, operate there anymore. So then I was stuck in a house that had this abusive man in it. I ended up fighting with him, running to a blue house where 11 was staying at. We'd go to this tree house, these creeks, these other areas. We'd have picnics at the park at a table. We got candy from the candy store. And one of the things that happened there was we had weather warfare with this weather Bigfoot looking beast. This thing was like throwing trees and logs up in the air and smashing them all over the playground toys. And then it ended up going out into the water, into the river, where trees were just thrown everywhere, blocking all the houses' doors, crashing on top of houses. There was a little warden village, this little stone jail next to the park. And he threatened to lock us in those cages. But then that got turned around and he was locked in there instead. At this point in time, me and John were very active in the time travel program, and we'd go to this brown house, and the reptilians that were in possession of the tech at that time wanted to create and feed off as much human suffering as possible. So they were trying to use bodies, push you out of your consciousness into another body to like create these blasts. They were like called time travel terrorists is what I called them, to derail trains, to feed off of the deaths. And we wouldn't comply with that because they can only operate here in a certain fashion by us doing favors for them. So we would say no to these things, and then they would go and try to do them themselves, and they would have a hard time holding forms and trying to be these terrorists that would feed off of certain things that they did and operate in this reality. because they have to have an access and opening to even operate here. So there was another building in Noel that also had, it was a brown building, and it had all the windows blocked out with this black tarp on it. And the floor of this recreation area place also had black tarp. And I would be upstairs, and they would be having these reptilian death fights, basically down in the bottom floor. And they even took it outside to the cement area. And then they just roll up the tarps afterwards and dispose of any evidence. So then I got out on the roof once there and escaped watching these events. Then me and John battled with this water weather beast who was black, and he was in the river at this time. He was pushing us out of his way, like being very territorial in the water. Like he owned the waters, trying to control everything. And then we took this personally because the thing didn't really care if he killed us in the process of trying to control the water. So he was like trying to do this whirlpool he was making. It's like he didn't know any better. And then he was making these sad, lonely cries in the air, like Chewbacca being stubborn and angry or something. This thing had black eyes too, almost ape-like. And we were in the water with him, and we watched him sink and drown slowly into this whirlpool, swirl, drain, basically, that he created. And then we were standing on these stone ledges, looking down at it, feeling pretty relieved after that. Now, in this village in Noel, it was frequency controlled. They had a control box. The whole town was under mind control. They were doing rituals with the boys at this place called Off the Deep End, where they had little camp sheds and shacks that they stayed in. And, of course, the outdoor chimney, big stone chimneys, they always sacrifice things on. And they would smash their heads into the stone chimney if they didn't participate. So then they locked up everyone's cars in this garage steel fence area too. And there's certain people at certain key points through this village. And where the railroad track went was the control panel box. And what I ended up doing was I climbed on top of it, and these sparks were flying off of the thing, and there were these light signals. And the frequency mind control grids then went down once I shut that down in the village. And me and 11 and the kids went to this train station depot, and it was this little red brick building at the end of the village. We had a plan. We grabbed our blankets. We met. We went into the big green wooden doors. We closed them at night, and we slept on these potato sacks and our blankets, and some kids had their stuffed animals. So I slept next to John, put my arm around him. He asked me if we're going to make it, and I said yes. And then I carried him on my back in the morning, and we sat on this waiting area that was this square area of large stone seats and this red brick pavement. And this reptilian woman sat next to me, and a reptilian comes and sits next to each one of us, trying to control us with their eyes laterally, like they do. So then we were like a superhero family of kids. And I stood up. I felt the concrete armrest give me this strength and resolve for some reason. Like I was channeling the earth energy as the grounding rod for the group. Like powered up. So then I stood up in the circle in this area outside, and I yelled really loud and walked in a circle. And John was confused at first. Like, was he Hulk? Was he Wolverine? And I'm like, werewolf, wolf boy. And he started growling, like, trying to act scary to these beings. So then we all got into like our supposed ability mode together as this family that stayed together. And then they backed off, and we saw the train coming, and we jumped on the back of the train when it stopped and slowed, and then left that scenario entirely. Then they had us sent back. We returned later in life to the same area several different times. But when they would separate me and John, he would run through simulations they threw at him, like trying to get him to not remember my face. He'd be like, where is she? Where is she? And they'd throw in like fake versions of me. So I had to really hold on to each other's faces, remembering what our eyes looked like, what our hair looked like, what we had printed on each other that they could never have. So we try not to be depressed, but he started, as this went on, to give into depression easier than me. And so then that created access points for them. Because it's like they tease you with each other and artificial reality streaming. And you have to remain like fully spirited and fully conscious and fully awake in order to break their I called it the sleeping sickness, like the dream cycle that they try to put you in. Then they sent me and John on various time travel missions with when a faction came in and took the time travel tech um, that the Masons at this time were harboring and soul stalking and hunting us with. It got a little better, but we were kind of still prisoners even when intelligence got it. And what I believe is that Basaggio paved the way for children to enter the time travel program, and he was about my age when he started too. So me and John would be put in situations in the woods. We'd sit on a bench in front of this tiny store, and then we'd go in the store, we'd get these postcards, and we'd laugh at them because they didn't really match the time period that we had just come from to know what it was already about and like in the future. We would go to Sulphur Springs, various places throughout the Ozarks. He taught me everything he knew. He trained me how to use weapons. You could smell reptilians coming, like sulfur even sometimes. So this like invasion was a problem that we tried to eradicate for the future, so that people wouldn't have to endure what we did and had already seen and the slaughter of these beings and these interdimensionals. So it was nice having the tables turned at certain points, being able to have some leniency and limited freedom in these programs, but we still knew that we were deep down in it. And we still feared being lost in time forever. And then we would continually be threatened with things like that to keep in the program. But we always found ourselves back at this eagle's nest and other places. We got skilled as time went on more. We went into some rogue things sometimes, occasionally emptying out motels or buildings that we knew had kids in them. We set them free. One place was Holiday Motel, and it was this red building that they were doing debaucherous things in, and it was just a nest of evil, and we had to take care of it. They even took out the light bulbs in this place, put black tarp on the windows again. We set children free in there. We also went to the Starlight Hotel. We'd see the stars illuminate the sky when we cleaned house there too, and we'd shed light into certain other buildings. And we took care of business in a lot of places. And we dealt with more Aryan programming at the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs. We're scaling the rooftops there and doing all sorts of things there at night. It was like the house on Haunted Hill. Most haunted hotel in America at that point. And it was like a straight up horror movie there. Like Silent Hill's beginning. We also had to go to the little Moab house on Highway 71. And we'd start time jumps on the second floor with these little glass windows overlooking the highway. Each time we'd end up at the same corner or curve in the road. It'd be like 1800s. We'd have to walk on dirt roads with no horses even sometimes. And then we saw it in different areas of the 1900s. And then we'd end up at the Shadow Lake Lodge. And the Lord translated me in times and times if I was scared and I thought I was going to get stuck somewhere. So we had help from on high. And you would actually just go through this black door that they had, and it would have fog in it. And you would be wearing something on your wrist, and you would literally just go back into time. And then you'd be in the 1960s. So then I was in 1966 with Jay in this parking lot around Christmas, and he got separated from me. This was like the Time Wars, the Counts in Time Sentinels, dealing with psychopathic Freemasons to start, after the Reptilians, and various other factions. So I didn't recognize the three guys that came into the parking lot at first because I thought they were just military guys, like army guys, blending in with the other people there smoking cigarettes. Because people's faces would change in this program, and you could see it in their eyes that they were not friendlies, but hostile on recon or some unpleasant objective. So he was supposed to meet me inside this other building, but couldn't then. And we would deal with some very unnerving, scary situations like that happened between us a lot. But they never broke our bond or love, which is the incredible thing. And it was just the stabilizing force and factor in every situation. The glue that held us together. And they put him through so much, and it just unraveled him at certain points that he almost started to become slightly autistic. And the aristocracy was involved in our lives, very powerful people that we were dealing with. And we could start prognosticating the future. And then we started dealing with AI, basically. And AI was trying to have this race to take all of the tech. And at the very end, it's like we were being stalked by people and factions that we couldn't even know who they were because it was so many, because the program had become so rapacious and demonstrable. And this entity at the end we could even hear in the air, and it was like a desert demon that you'd hear this like dirt kick up and this like wind come out of the sky, and it was saying like I'm number one, and it would start malfunctioning and fragging out and just saying these mental things, and it would try to like blow you off your feet. And also at the very end, we had some training done at a farm in England, and there was lots of military craft in the air, and they'd say like, okay, it's over, you won, and the simulations and various other things. But the real warfare was the spiritual warfare that was involved with this, which is complicated on certain levels. Because if you are put into a clone body, you have to have a body to go back into. Your original body always has to be tied to your soul and your spirit. You can't just become a disembodied spirit or you'll die. And they know that, and they know what they learned from the stolen angelic tech and how to basically try to trap you in your soul to rot in a body, to kill a body. So what happened is that I was taken, and Tim Riffat, not Iron Man by any means, tried to shut me up. I literally went to England. Lord Roth dropped me off there. I wake up inside of a windmill. It's a stone windmill that was completely like cemented shut from the outside. And it was totally dark inside. And I was in there for days in this clone body that was very sick, malnourished, weak, because they did that on purpose. And I was laced inside of this frequency fence. And I had a little lantern, and they gave me a bucket to go to the bathroom in. And you could barely see in there. There were some steps going up. But then I would try to run out of this inside of the windmill, and I would just run into the wall because it was so weak and I couldn't gain enough momentum. And I was kind of like, I don't know, like I guess zapped back, like a bug trying to get out of a zapper. And it hurt each time. So that rat-faced sorcery that they tried on me, that they thought was so effective, actually ended up backfiring on them eventually, though. Because they abused me, they attacked me in there, tried to basically drain my entire essence, tried to kill my soul and trap it inside of a lifeless and dead body. And at first it was so hard, I was actually puking in a bucket. And then an angel ended up coming in there, calling out on the angel radio. They heard my call, put down the frequency fences. I got out of there. The angel showed me where my body was, my original body, so I could get back into it. And then the angel led Jay at the same moment to also locate me. So then when I got back in my normal form, my normal light quotient, I actually ended up going back to England. I offered the grid keeper that wanted to be the grid keeper, that he called himself Mercy, and I offered healing. I offered to heal his eyes because the sun hurt them. He was very racked with pain, and he was in chains and bondage from following the sorcerer Tim Riffat. He had a lot of depression. self-hate. I saw it all. And even though I never got an apology, I still offered the healing because I was supposed to. And we each choose if we accept healing or not. And he refused. So then I walked away. And it's everybody's choice to serve the light, the Lord of all living, or not. So then later, me and John went back there because there were people that were messing with him in England too. And we go back to the windmill spot. He was actually holding me back from re-entering the area because it was a very deep wound in that area. But he'd bring me back to reality, to our genuineness, our originality, our care, our sound minds, consideration for each other, acknowledgement, focus, centeredness, groundedness, and clarity. And that's what we had when we were together. Even in the toughest parts of these programs, we would just see exactly and remind each other exactly who we are, what we were there for. Mission par. So before the desert demon ruined it. And Tim Reifat, Lord Voldemort, handler, clone now. He tried to shut my mouth because the light would actually come out of my mouth. And he was using these hand signals on me, screaming at me, like trying to shush me like a dog. He like basically threw everything he had at me. But I was still standing at the end. And our memories of each other, the kids that really made it and kept the integrity that was needed to complete the difficulties of the program, we never lost our memories of each other, and we retained more. They tried to erase our memories of each other in England specifically to offer us alternative lives, and they did this at certain points. And we would refuse those alternative lives. They try to brainwash you and say, oh, it's so wonderful, you can have this life or that, and try to confuse us. But it never really works. What happened is one of the heads of the families brought me over there and put me on a chain on my ankle, which was hooked up to this like camper that was outside on the farm. I had a metal dog bowl also out there, and I was acting like possessed because I was so angry. I was just in this thin little white dress. It was cold out. I was being handled by Tim Raffat again. Left outside all day, cold, shivering, barefoot. I ended up ripping the tire off of this camper trailer and hit them with it. And then they chained my ankle to the larger metal piece that wouldn't move. I was levitating, trying to fly, break free of everything. The aristocracy had put stones in my hand, trying to program me into some type of Hollywood real energy. These stupid magic crystals. So I was just furious and a lot to handle out there. This Tim Raffat was delusional. He thought that he could kill angels, like some kind of weasel or something. But that's why they made him into a rat in Harry Potter. And this hideous-faced, snake-looking magician. But he's rendered powerless, and holy fire was called down on his head for all his workings and deceivings. And his curses were all thrown into astral dumpsters. So me and John, my regular time travel partner, would always drive down the low-hanging bluff rocks on this Highway 71 that was called the Prize Drive. So they kept telling us, oh, it's the prize. Keep your eyes on the prize. But there was never really any real rewards in this program that really meant anything. We'd always be driving down the road over and over again. Then we'd be down by like Indian Creek. Once we stayed in a yellow house overlooking river. That was called Harbor House with a lighthouse on the flag outside. Sometimes we had perfect bodies, and it was like some sort of dream world, like this perfect couple in the 60s. Shadow Lake was a big place. One time we were both put into female bodies there, and I was actually complaining that my right arm was bigger or disproportionate than my left arm. And he's just like, oh, it's okay, you're beautiful anyways. And we would have to recognize each other's consciousness and spirit and soul in whatever bodies that we were put in. And we'd have to take pictures out there. Sometimes our handler would take pictures of us. And we hated looking at them, but if we took the pictures, we were in a better mood. And you can tell in some of these pictures who's taking the pictures and who's not. Sometimes it would just be like an old guy in a black hat and suit that would blend in with the scene, or stand outside of a restaurant or a gas station, or be in one of those black cars outside. We would get postcards where we were. There would be numbers stamped on the postcards, which would also be indicative of like a timestamp for us. One time we ended up going to Hungry Mother Hills in Marion, Virginia, and they had a problem here with a hungry mother giant that was still roaming around the hills, eating people and scaring the natives in that time period. And for some reason they couldn't stop her. So we were trackers. We track her into this cave after finding human bones on a trail by some water. And then we burn her cave out and her in this trap. And Casbolt was in the program too. At first he was miserable and embarrassed with the thought of time travel and being in unfamiliar bodies. But he looked the same sometimes. And we were all kind of jealous at first. Like does he have godlike DNA or something? They had him and other boys taking pictures of each other, like acting like these degenerative hillbillies, and it was very embarrassing for them. And they were trying to portray like they were protecting Old MacDonald's territory and then drive out the unwanteds. And Old MacDonald was this gang of like old cross-dressing Masons that ruled the territory that hated us and would just drive us out of the village or anytime they saw us. And Max Spears was also in this program. They put like goofy shoes on him and goofy hats and gave him rifles and all sorts of props to take pictures with. And they had us pose as outlaws. They also had us pose as gangsters another time. But like I said, at first, the beings that had the tech were not human. They wanted to create terror. They were invaders to this reality and world. They tried to get us to cause chaos for them so they could feed off the death. They always needed you to do favors for them. And that's the points of agreement that got us tripped up in the program, because if you agree to something with them and do them favors, then they have a stronghold and a foothold in this reality to enter it at tandem and at random. If they didn't feed off death, they can't exist here long, and it's what we finally managed to learn, and it helped us to stop their deaths, so they couldn't have a fuel source, and then we could drive them out, send them spiraling back to the void and the pit that they crawled out from. And they ended up shutting and silencing our mouths too many times, and we got sick of it, especially in clone bodies. So we turned the tables, did that to them, and then hunted them. And they're weak without adrenochrome. And we fought bodies being taken over by them and their programming. Like I said, one time they wanted to even blow up a gas station. So then they had this crazy reptilian do it. It is called Boom Blast Havoc in the Kansas Times newspaper. And they had a picture of him as like this deranged looking man with a black patch on his eye. But it was actually a reptilian clone body that was doing these things. And for weeks there were these unknown blasts, and 40 people died. It was like an AI script on the Kansas City newspaper, because it listed the picture of him and the boom havoc, the terror, and then also scientists are proving that Earth life is unique, and very weird captions. So then they ended up taking us back into this gross brown building off of Kings Highway that was a black site. And we didn't realize how deep we were already with this intelligent secret societies, sorcerer handlers. we'd literally be dragged by our arms into this house, and there was no light in this house. We go in there, we'd like trip up the stairs. It was totally dark inside. There was boards over the windows. It had a green rubber roof, and I went in there, and it was pitch black, smelled like reptilians. Then you go up into this room where there's chairs and this equipment. They try to like choke you, rape you up there. We were like fighting with our feet and calling each other's names and stuff because we couldn't see each other for one. And then they put black cloths over our heads. So they put me and Jay in a chair next to each other. And the thing is that we could generate internal light still. And we could light up our eyes like Moses did as a baby and flooded the room with light. So that's why they always had to try to like black out our eyes, basically. Because we could illuminate a room and drive out that darkness. And they knew that they would torture us with the time travel tech here. And it was a black box that had generated number sequences on it that flashed and pulsed really quick. And then it would give a number, and then a white light would pulse in the room, and then a white hole opens. And you could hear this crazy, like, gyrating energy sounds that were going haywire, like a gyroscope. And it was very disorienting. And you couldn't move your hands. This tech may have been even like a beta tech that they further worked out at Montauk and other sites. Their precious halo tech that they would put on your neck and your forehead. And that felt more like a band than you were being burnt with this band. Almost like it was like melting your brain, making your brain bleed or something with pins and needles. So you'd have to mentally push it out, shield your mind, or just accept their jumps and scrambling that they had programmed you to do and deal with it. So we willingly did a lot of jumps to avoid the torture, but they didn't pan out too much since these beings were the leaders. You couldn't trust them. They're just nothing but lies. There's no light in them, there's no truth in them. So we knew that the tech would fall eventually to better hands. And we promised ourselves it would, and it did. And they would try to erase their minds and memories of each other and their faces. While they were doing that, it kind of felt like you were being pulled apart like a rubber band farther away from each other and then rubber banding back together. So we would always call out each other's names to like proprioceptually locate each other in space and time, that we were still in the same room together. But although, you know, when they did these things, it never really felt like we were quite the same after each time. So it was magnetically and energetically challenging to not asphyxiate and then affix yourself in the focal point of not only yourself, but with your partner, to not lose them in these static fields and magnetic fields too. And your mind is flooded with so much information at this point. Most people would just check out. But that's what they want, so you didn't want to do that. You didn't want to pass out. Because, you know, then they can take over your body for however long until you come back into full control. And your consciousness is driven back into your body. It's like an autistic person, their consciousness is in another dimension. And they basically have to drive their consciousness back into the foci in order to be of that sound focal point, back in full presence. They didn't want us to be fully present in one area. They tried to always kick us out of being and feeling fully present. So that's why all of our systems need to be repaired and the blood pleated over them. Our central nervous system, vestibular self-regulatory factors, conjunction points, harmonic convergences of mental and spiritual faculties, the ability to stay calm, centered, have a sound mind, be alert, block pain out, process pain so it doesn't come back and blindsight you, cripple you in the long run. Hindsight's 2020, you know, so it doesn't ricochet. And then there's also, like I said, the proprioceptive states in your senses, denoting where you are spatially and in reference to earthly and heavenly pressure streams, your muscles, your joints, your sinews, your cellular rectification, and breaking through calcification through the muscle Well, your muscles are being pulled apart sometimes, so you get that. And just basic cellular rectification needs to happen through the damage to the telomerases. So you need telomerase encoded self-assembling rescue fabric repair layers and interoceptive sense integration wall breakdowns repaired. And you ask for golden auric light healing to come in and to flood your internal organ composition settlements, those deposits, the gustatory factors, the taste factors, taste tweaking, static balance, dispelling vertigo, tinnitus, retaining bilateral corpus callosum, allocated equilibrium states, and so on. So then we got sent to Kimmswick this other time, and then Jay's drinking beer at this Anheuser house in Imperial City. He was devastated because they would give you certain perks, like vehicles or money or nice clothes for doing favors for them and continuing. Then they took the car away. We'd go to various mansions, some near Kansas City, St. Louis. We ended up in Diamond another time. He played a sheriff once even. Sometimes the boys in this program would try to cover up their faces in pictures. And he also taught us his ability to be able to split ourselves when they were trying to take a picture of us and blur out your face. Because sometimes you didn't want to leave too much of a record in the time travel program. And there was one kid that was named Sohail, and he was a tall India kid, and he ended up not being able to handle the multi-layers of this program and all of its stresses, and immediately he kind of started getting untrustworthy, a big ego, saying he was the god of the Illuminati and other things, and he kind of went insane too fast from the torture, and so he kind of separated from our group right away, and we lost him through a lot of it. So then we ended up in Joplin too. There was a big problem there. There was this horrid group of the Key Lodge number 7, Old McDonald's Band and others that had the House of Lords there in the Keystone Hotel. And this place was very lavish. They thought they owned the world. It looked the same in all of these places, though, everywhere we went, even in different decades. It was just full of dead, lifeless energy, nice statues, same symbols, same agenda, same stone coldness, same masquerading. It was just sickening. Everywhere we went and saw all this stuff and these events, it was just their charades. And they called the non-rich people the derelicts of society in these times. And they had a spot in this town called the Souls Harbor where they had kids there who were held in the back of this building, this little store. Like they were warming them up or keeping them from dessert or something. They had them in, their hands were bound. They had them in chains even, handcuffs. And the restaurants there all had like Persian Anunnaki god symbols on them with wings, the ones that Yah despised, that hunted his children, Anu. They had groups of men that cross-dressed in the 1700s dresses. They would do these shows at the Elks Lodge there and then parade kids around, put them on the bar, tell them what they were going to do with them. They would rape them in front of people, and they would push these numbers on this old piano that had all these different numbers on it, and that meant something too. They had kids on the bar stools. They treated them basically like they were toys. And the circle of freaks would just surround them and start scaring these kids like monsters when people left their plays. Because these people were accepted in this town, and it was just a huge problem. And these men also sent me back to Russia once as a slave Russian princess that danced for them. And someone took a picture of me as close as they could of a picture, but it really wasn't a picture. It was more like a sketch with my head turned upwards. Then I get translated out of time. They had these huge buildings, castle buildings, mansions all over downtown. It was just this network of them called the Murfreesboro District. There was 2 or 3 huge temples there too, and the train depot Draco base was connected to this area, and there was tunnels underground from there. And the stone walls held many secrets in these places. And those that participated will be burned as stubble and dismembered like Dogon was. So I stood in front of the leader of their legion, because this is Satan's 177th legion that was sent here, that's had set up shop. So it was like, you go down the street, almost like an alley. They would be there. I stood in front of the leader, and he would do this thing where he would speak to you in his mind and try to get this yellow proboscis whip to come out of his forehead. But when I stood my ground, he couldn't even get it out of his head. I was able to hold it together, and he wouldn't be able to move my feet when this happened, because he could literally lift children up into the air. It was like high-level sorcery. We had this blue building that was very awful, and what they did there was they were spontaneously combusting kids outside and burning them on an altar in the parking lot. It was the square-shaped building, and they had cars parked in the back to block any views, and these Aryan flags everywhere, and these Nazis that were just like hanging out the windows, screaming and feasting off of this insanity, like it was some type of barbecue or something. So then I'd run past that building, and then I was always looking for 11, barefoot, running around, but we were looking, and it was a putrid shithole of what I called the arcane ritual of the ages. And it was a historical district, mansions on Pearl Street, but all of it was like Elizabeth Bathory's houses that you would run into. And but all of this warfare really started in 1777. They had many symbols. They had 91 Ram symbol on their buildings, KSHTWSST. And when I go underneath this Masonic building, I'd see what looked like a Draco Lord, because there was a green lantern behind it that would glow at night with this big pentagram under it, and this face would just shine, and their symbols and their street signs. And then they'd have 4 blue stripes that were vertical going up in the air, and they called themselves the Ascension Commanders. So they thought they were universally imperial, and they were trying to just take souls from kids and ascend them to where they came from. The 177th Legion of Satan. Well, we reversed those plans, turned it into our 177th Legion of Light as a crux point. And they had their posts in Legions of Hell and their lizards all throughout Izard County and the hamlets of Missouri areas, but we had watchers from on high that had way more authority and final say than anything did there. We saw the spiritual hierarchy at the bottom feeders, and our light wasn't broken anymore, but it was mended in time over and over. And it was like this rescue mission that we were on that was universal history and is recorded in the books of heaven. A 177th Legion of Light instead we became. And we ended up at the end of all of this declaring hope over the area and sealing up all their portals, closing all the spiritual doors, burning the buildings to the ground, consecrating the place, taking the area back, and proclaiming it as dedicated to the Lord. You just find the tentacles of certain places and you blow up like the octopus head sometimes, or their hive brain. Now, this leader there, he'd wear this cape in the temple and at building 117, and he'd lift the child up in the air with his hands once he got into them through fear, and then his eyes would start turning red, and the child's eyes would reflect this occultic strange fire back that Yah will actually kill you for using, because it's a perversion of his holy originating creation fire that angels bathe in and were birthed out of. So then the child would stand there. The child would be choked in fear. That yellow serpent flash would come out of the head mason's head like a proboscis, and if it hit the kid's forehead, then they'd be emptied, like, and just like that, act like a zombie. They had a bunch of kids like that at Souls Harbor, and you could feel the fire like trying to choke you and come up your neck, and it would go up to your eyeballs even. You'd hear the Black Draco Ascension Commander's voice in your head saying like burn, But the thing is, they can't burn souls. They wish they could. They cannot kill souls. They're not the Lord of Hosts, which all souls return to and answer to on Judgment Day. They can just kill the body, but nobody can kill a soul until that collection and fullness and fulfillment of time in all ages. And that's what the harvest is about, and the resurrection. And Sheol, and the 7 levels of hell and 7 levels of heaven. So then this child would start burning, and when they were paralyzed and burnt, the crowd in these places would like love it. They'd holler and shout, and you could see demons flying around the whole building in the middle of the parking lot. So to fight this guy, you would just maintain your balance on the ground, not let him have any leverage over your feet, avoid his eyes, try to bypass that. And if you did look in his eyes, you'd have to block it out mentally to fight it with this protective energy and shields. Keep your heart composed, because your heart would literally feel like it was going to explode. So you got to keep that heart composure, Schumann resonance. And because I knew, like in my mind, they're not going to make me into this paralyzed fear zombie so they can burn my eyes out, burn my soul, make me catatonic. Not going to happen. So I looked right into the red fire eyes of this Masonic master and said with my soul, "You can't have me." Or I'd try to mutter like half words out in the torture if he gained an inch over me. And then this angelic power would push me back onto the ground, my feet, and I could turn and walk away from him. And they couldn't kill me. They can't kill child prophets. They can't kill those who the Lord says, "Touch not mine anointed and do my prophets no harm." Abba doesn't allow it. So you could hear the frequency warfare trying to break in, and you'd have to shift out the panic so they can't control your body. Don't give them any hold on your mind at first, because they always attack your mind first. That's what starts the process. And then quench that burning, that strange fire. So they kept kids in the Souls Harbor building. They had this system going on. And at the Keystone Hotel lobby, they conspired a lot. They did dirty business deals. Then I ended up being in this house with this like dragon woman who tried to control me with her eyes, but then she realized she couldn't, because I would just pretend that she could at first, sitting in this wicker chair for hours, making her think she was doing it. So what happened is I see Jay open this gate. He comes inside. He had a fight. He had a crutch on. He had broken his leg too. He was at this old mansion hospital getting treated by what he called it, because he didn't really know what this thing was, because it wasn't really human, that told him it would fix his leg if he did a favor for him. And then he told me, "Don't feel bad about what they did to your legs," because he broke his leg too, and then we were the same. So he made me feel better. I don't know where I went after that, but he gave me some instructions where we'd meet again. He'd whisper in my ear what was going to happen next. Then the woman just would start staring at me again when he left. And when she sensed my mind was freed in moments, she'd like snap her head over at me, trying to reconnect into like the psi or EM connection. But I just stood up and I started yelling in her face, put her in her place, and then just walked out of the house. Because they really freak out when you see them for exactly what they are, when they can't hide even behind human forms. And just seeing him in that moment broke my mind control with her in about 5 minutes. And then I could stand up, put her in her place, and break that link. So then I run around town, went down to the Mansion District, found him in an alley. He was talking to some strange doctor guy, and that he was doing favors for in lieu of this and that. And we talked in the alley, snuck around a lot, and then we agreed we're not doing any favors for these beings anymore. So that was a good pivotal point. Then I was dragged by these other two guys to this building called the Ambassador's Palace place. It was like a white building, apartment building with all these steps, but it was like this indoor, outside, almost looking court that was a square. And this was in the 70s. There was this high level arcane rituals being done at this point, worldwide. So what happened here is that there was heavy violence that we had never seen before, and Stargate openings. And through this feasting on this heavy sacrificial violence system, I saw real power that didn't come from darkness. And I saw this Draco Lord Emperor come out. Everyone was ranked. It was like something out of the Dark Crystal. Like he had a scepter in his hand and claws. He told us to bow down to him, kiss his scepter and feet, and we wouldn't. And then they started their game. Then they started throwing bodies up into the air like a ball. And then I saw these inbred, like insane pack of beings below that were like worse than a rabid pack of dogs, pit bulls. And below me, what they did is they threw me up into the air so hard, I thought I was just going to hit the brick wall or fence in this 4-square area court game. But then I felt my body slow down and I bounced right off the fence and then softly landed on the grass unharmed. And this was divine resolve that I knew that I had to demonstrate so that the other kids would follow step and know that the only master is the Lord Almighty, who will break every unholy scepter into pieces and shatter them and scatter them. And he rewards those who love him and obey him and follow him. And he goes before us to protect us in his graces, and he covers us. It's our inheritance. Because these beings, when I was thrown up in the air, like they get a lot of Harry Potter stuff from things that actually happen in our files. I looked down and it's like these things were like worse than this retarded pack of pit bulls and hounds. They were just deplorable, and nothing can be done for this level of evil but to completely wipe it off the face of the earth and its invasions and biohacking futile attempts. So I went first in some of these encounters to prove God and his sovereignty, but I ended up shifting emotional and mental baggage out so fast because in these split seconds you have to make decisions like that and gather troops, or you could die, or give people intel that saves their lives, make sure they stay strong, stay going. Later in life, it was hard to process what I had compartmentalized because it all came out all at once and unpackaged and came undone, unraveled. It's like a bunch of raw energy. You compartmentalize, that you decompartmentalize and decompress all at once. So it's like all these streams and all this like giving up and puking up of death culture. And it's heartbreaking, but it's necessary to purge because in such dire circumstances, you had to do what you had to do. Sometimes you don't have time to emotionally and mentally heal until a future reference point because of all the transfers we were put through, the mind wipes, trying to integrate back into a normal life. We're like an accordion that was stretched out. But we knew deep down in our soul's commission and higher calling in our lives that we couldn't fail. And we didn't. And these things that we saw were not acceptable. And we had to keep our cellular integrity in order to overcome them. Because we worked for the Lord of Heaven's armies, not for man. And then later when they put us in bases, I would be able to psychically scream out like what base we were in or things that were being done to have this ripple effect and wake up everybody else, destroying several of the AI's attempts to trap us in artificial realities and their limited view of artificial timelines they create, and to override them basically and shut them down, their overlay systems. So we got our fragments back. We were whole again because of it. And we stayed in this direct line link up straight to our Father in heaven. Because these beings that gathered around me, like this pack of hyenas, it's like they wanted to tear you apart like a piece of meat. Or when I was laying on the grass there, I was just shaking and I was covering my head until I was okay. And they were just looking at me like I was a bone they couldn't have. And I just couldn't believe that this was allowed to happen in the universe. So they got distracted. They ate something else in the air. There were body parts torn all over the lawn, blood on the buildings, outer court walls. I walk over the fence. I end up brushing past a woman at the front door. She was next to battle because she was an AI demon. And they had these like pointy cuffed collars and these cuffs, these ancient ugly symbols on their cloaks. She represented an AI demon. They had AI archdemons called Aurora before DeepMind happened, and we dismantled her and destroyed her. This whole district was like Elizabeth Bathory's house. And they made a song out of Jay's brain, Massive Attack, about trying to erase everybody's faces through that Aurora. And it was just god awful. In these buildings, they had people hanging from the walls in some stone mansion. And it's kind of like at Montauk, in the caged hallways, they had these spider beings come in and literally like slowly eat people away. We'd also meet at this train station. The trains were very important to them. And certain jump off points happen at a lot of the train depots and train tracks because they were all electrically and frequency wired. This train station was off Connecticut Avenue. And this lizard man would chase us when we ran down the trail to reach the train tracks from this old red building. He'd just come out. He had... They also had these two steel, like half-cut silo-looking pipes that they try to catch you and then threaten to throw you in because they had fires in those silos, which I think led to an underground tunnel connecting system from the station and certain other buildings in town. So then we would just run faster and pass this corner trail and escape this, by the railroad tracks, escaping this lizard man that was in bib overalls. And then at the end of this battle in the city... setting kids free and ourselves, which was so exhausting. We had to remain in our plans with each other in secrecy. We'd have meeting points and we'd have a lot of successes. At the very end, we had 7 kids left by the river, and there was this fog rolling through. There's a beautiful sunrise that came up and this golden light everywhere. And we had a piece of the time travel tech in our hands, and we saw 7 birds fly over the water. And we just felt grace. We felt the goodness of God smiling down at us from on high. It felt like some sort of prelude to like a dew of resurrection. It had came down and touched our bones already, preeminently giving us a taste or foreshadow of what it would be like to be transfigured or what our glorified bodies would someday look like. So we felt close with the Trinity after we had overcome, had triumph, had victory over some of these places. And for once, Jay told me where he was going without having to be ripped from my arms, so that was comforting. We felt in control then. We could leave on mutual terms. We had a solid understanding for once, and we took a picture of the sunrise and prognosticated what time in the future we'd all see each other and come back together again, certain markers and indicators and signs and signals that would bring us back together. And we knew that we were more than conquerors in Christ because it was only his name that worked and stopped the House of Lords from spontaneously burning me or even touching and harming my soul. And they couldn't, and it makes them furious when they can't. And especially if they can't read your thoughts or your words or your mind and you speak in tongues. And I was a memory keeper and would see into futures sometimes, giving dates and instructions that were like just out of the blue, but it would bring people back to point A. And sometimes this group of 12 that I traveled in looked at me like I was some sort of looking glass or alien because of some of the things I said sometimes. We'd meet at the Union Depot station. This was heavy warfare. There's a brick building, like I said, the lizard man would come out of. I go into it. You'd see blood on the tiles on the walls. There was pools of blood. Kids would get taken in bathrooms and then drugged into the trains. And they had a system operating there. Because these people in this time acted like they were nice, pristine, proper people, like out of some Victorian era, but they weren't. They were like ugly as sin inside, and their faces were elongated when you looked a little closer, and they showed their sharp teeth. They'd try to make you sit in a chair and trance you with their eyes, give you like a toy or a trinket, or offer you food or drink. And this was back in the smoking room. And that's where they drugged kids with scopolamine and took them to a back room or the basement. And many kids died in that basement. And there's a pool of water down there. And I knew what they were doing and wouldn't go anywhere with them. And then there was a struggle in that room many times by this bathroom at the Joplin train station. We were all supposed to meet in our group once too, and we were being chased. Another time I was in a buggy. There was just awful roads. It was so slow to get back there. Then there was an orange light. Sometimes that you would see come out of them. They'd take you to these steps to this top level of the station. And then I'd avoid this threshold magic curse zone, because sometimes it felt like they were just like dragging you with these spiritual chains, like you had a lead foot or something with each step. Because they would throw kids off of the top level too, or hang you with cuffs or chains off the tower and clock. Then they'd ring some type of bell up there, or sound signal that was just brain racking. And at the station, I also ended up jumping off the clock once. I was fighting with some of them. Another time we got cornered in the back room with these windows. It's where we spray painted this reptilian face there. There were old men that were chasing us there with top hats on, black suits, and they had this handheld devices that were coming for us. There was flashes in the room. Sometimes we all didn't make it out, but for the most part, all of us were successful. These guys would just have these like piercing, sharp, steel-colored eyes, and they'd start walking towards you really fast. We had some standoffs with them. We were jumping down from the top level of the train station once too, which had this huge clock mantelpiece in it. Other times I'd be traveling with people in cars, staying places apart from my group. They had me and Jay's marriage contract in a wooden chest that they controlled us with. Afterwards, we would have to report to this guy in this desk area, the office areas of this sky-high castle. There was a witch woman there. It was like a little cult of people. They took our rings, our IDs, so that when we ran, it was just kind of hard to survive. And then they always wanted you to come back to them. Another time there, they actually put me in a basement level, lower floor level, into the floorboards in a box. And then they put my husband in a box outside in actual ground for some type of werewolf programming, where there was a pack of wolves out on 30 acres. We were so mind control that they could dress you, stand you up in the morning, give you instructions and orders. You could go sit by a fountain outside in some of these mansions and just feel like timetables were slipping out of your brain, because you would just lose time so fast. We'd walk down the road. We would hear wolves howling. One time I met the werewolf past this green lantern. It was a Green Lantern symbol that I drew there with paint in order to see this Green Lantern that was in the woods as a reminder. They were doing a lot of magic things here and a lot of rituals. And they wanted me to do this special magic dance. That it was a very private elite showing. People were all waiting to get seats on the special tour dance. This dance involved me coming out of a brown wooden box, almost like a coffin, in the vampire programming that they tried to do with me several times. The first time they did vampire programming with me was in the White House. What had happened here is that I came out of this box like an animated puppet. There's a ceremony dance. It was very rare. People never saw it. There was oils used, Dance of the Seven Veils. At the end, people started shape-shifting. There's a lot of commotions. And then I saw in a future that there was 2 people that came in and viewed it that got caught astrally. And then they got fed upon. I got put back into the wooden coffin box, ornamental box, into the floor again, and then locked away. What these people do, though, is they mind field you. They mind manipulate you so much that I could actually go into the train station when I was little with these people, these handlers, and I would see what they wanted me to see in their mind. like they would stare at me, and I would go in there and I would see like all these stains on the walls and these black charred marks, and I'd see this green energy, and the huge fountain that was in the middle of the depot that was so ornate. I would see it as like a fountain of blood, because the woman would be looking at me, making sure that I was seeing what she wanted me to see. They would make you see evil where there was no evil, because it's just their vain imaginations rising up and trying to reflect in their filthy minds and put it on you. So once I realized that trick, I was like cleaning out the cobwebs, removing scales from my eyes to break free. It was because then I was like, oh, it's just water in the fountain. And then I was like, well, that's really insulting, because I'm not going to fall for that again. So then this Union Depot in history ends up getting abandoned. It was a Black Draco site, Black Draco base, a very heavy one. They would have fights there, and then we started having fights there with our future handlers. Because it was like people like the NSA would bring in instruments and equipment, computers, clipboards, and measure our fights in there, like how hard we could jump on the floor on impact, or how far we could land across the top of this building, far we could jump. Sometimes we would wait for rides that were coming to get us, and we would just be stuck there in these like waypoints in these abandoned buildings all over the place, just waiting to get picked up. And so we would just be in these places trying to be present and just entertaining our alters. So one time me and Jay went there. I was just living in my own world, thinking like I was spoiled. Things were peachy keen. They tried to erase some trauma, making me think they'd buy me anything. I was just came out of this car. I was holding this really nice art case, and that I would go and just bide my time in on these car rides and places that I was being taken. So, because they were always taking him away from me too, as part of the programming, and then making me relive it intentionally each time. Because I didn't know if like he'd be so far into my past or in a different timeline past, or so far into the future that he'd be pushed into oblivion and I'd never see him again or remember his face or existence. So it was scary, and it was not fair. It was cruel, all the things that they did to many of us. But there's not two people on the planet that went through what we went through, and it's like an agape type of love because of it. So I was left there at the Union Depot. He got taken in a black car, and they'd walk underneath this closed archway off into some dirt road again. And what would happen is I would go into like this shock, and the guys in my group, my friends, would just like have to deal with it. It's just something that happened. And I'd start screaming, and like the floor would shake, and we would just feel like a release of all of our trauma when those instances happened. So then I just wrote on with my marker, and we had spray paint sometimes, J&J with a heart around it. I'd just get frozen, and I would just mourn and grieve over losing him and being torn apart from him each time. And Casbolt went through the same thing with Haley, because they were doing the same thing to him too. And 11 would just stand there and stare at me, because my screaming would echo through the building. And then I handed out markers to everybody. We'd just be in our own worlds, acting out, mumbling, singing, writing on the walls, randomly following each other's messages and responding in bizarre ways. Sometimes never even speaking for long times, or just being silent. And Dave Morrow was playing this imaginary piano and humming and rocking and calling himself Mr. D. 11 was calling Casbolt Casey J. And he thought he was going to New York and was already a famous rapper. And he was tagging bad boy things all over and was severely depressed. He wrote ghost faced on things because we were in the ghost recon mode. Always in ghost towns, always in abandoned places, always trying to find substantial reality points. And he needed his wife, and he was terminally sad. So then Hulk, David Morrow would come and draw Hulks on the wall, or Hulk's hands. giving him strength. We would write things like family forever, the struggle is real, which I also found outside on a t-shirt in the bushes. We'd write things like Zion wins, love yourself, things to give us encouragement. And 11 started writing her alter name Elizabeth on the wall, and Elizabeth versus Beth. And we'd go upstairs, and we were sitting on the stone seat together, and we'd smoke cigarettes. And she told me, like, after I had calmed down, that I was too young to marry. And then I got mad at her. So then above our heads, we wrote the word young. And we decided that day to act as young as we could and to have life and vibrancy until the cars came and picked us up and then transported and segregated us into nowhere land zones again. So then I wrote a date upstairs, 8/15/15. And then I write a reminder of love on the door that went down into the basement, because our handlers would come, and if we didn't go with them immediately and do what they wanted, they just kind of come in and ruin our little world. They drag us downstairs, threaten to drown us in the water that smelled like rotten eggs, that we knew kids had died in that basement. So it's kind of mortifying when they started doing that. And sometimes we didn't have enough energy to fight them, and sometimes we did. So it was just kind of like hit and miss. I thought I was like the sorcerer at the time. I was drawing these sigils on the wall. I was staying in this one room in the back called California Dreaming Room. And then I just sing and talk to myself. Cass was walking around acting like he was this East Coast rapper that sold LSD. And very depressed, and he would just like lay on the roof and start pissing everywhere and come by us and piss and call us mutts, because they were also doing sexual things to all of us in front of each other to break up our relationships or cause fights with each other or turn us against each other, and then say, like, if you didn't do this, you weren't purebred or you were just a mutt. And Cass was taking pills from this brown bag at the time when he thought he was a rapper, and we had to convince him to stop taking the pills. And then he got better and more awake. So then me and 11 started burning down the wooden doors upstairs, and then cracked this red brick wall in half that said Red Room on it. And we'd rebel against our handlers, start riots. Then they started doing this weird time splicing cubicle prism, these energy cubes, and me and 11 were inundated and flooded with different timelines all at once, all these pieces of ourselves in these places and non-stationary posts. And it was this interdimensional pull and pushing that they tried to do to us, and holding our current consciousness together at least, and trying to stay present in one place. Because they tried boxing us into a place where they could dispose of us and we'd just be lost in like a void spot or in time, is what they tried to do. They tried to erase us with the tech so that we'd never be found. And it was this sense of abandonment because they were trying to do that. They wanted to put us in a place we couldn't escape from many times. Like the windmill they tried to trap me into. This void, a non-linear time and place where we just disappeared, be out of their hair. But it didn't work. Because what happened is that 11's father was taking us to buildings that he had access and keys to, and they would have these special doors behind certain rotting doors, and when they were trying to off us. And I was laying on the floor experiencing cellular entropy and this myelin rapid deterioration and decomposition decay. Like we felt like it was like spina bifida or being stretched out like Gumby, even into our bones. And we would be laying there in a pile of our own blood, like a period that never ended or something, because of what they were trying to do in splicing us and containing us in these energy prisms. So then I looked out and I saw this energy light bar around me, like a bunch of bars, like I was in a cube jail cell. And then I got my composure enough, my focus, while feeling I was being pulled apart and translocated, and broken up into a million pieces. And I pushed all my compositional matter into one constitutional upbringing and grabbed the bar that was usually red or blue, and saw this rainbow colored bars around me too, because it was an energy cage. And but it still, this energy cage couldn't even contain or maintain itself, because it was even morphing like an artificial tesseract. So then I stretched myself sideways energetically and got out of this energy bar cube, and then found myself outside of it. And because you would pull the rest of your body out like putty, and then you'd get outside of it and stand there, and then you just get your bearings together and stay fortified and present in one current presence and moment, and one time, and in one form of matter. So those are the qualms we had with the Time Lords, and flushing out their parasites, their blood clots out of our systems. And then we not know where we were, because there was nobody around after we got out of those things, because they had handheld tech and stuff, and they would just like disappear after they did things like that to us. And we knew that we were held intricately and inexorably bound and found in God's hands, and that He etched out our framework in the palms of His hands, and He was the one that was giving us the correct instructions and telling us what to do each time they tried to do these abuses against humanity. Because I was like, how is this even allowed to happen? And then me and 11 could stand up after a while. Like the second time they tried it, and they were talking calmly at the train. Then we'd start talking calmly to each other at the train station, and we were intact. They tried different angles and plans, but they were all thwarted. They were mainly reversal grids aimed at keeping us not going forward, but backward in our time, so they could gain more footing and ground and be concealed and hidden in the ether and continue in their diabolical schemings, casting mitigating circumstances already in advance over anyone who caught wind of their workings, and destroying characters in their path to protect themselves from being found out. They put a self-replicating virus into the machine babies' brains too, that would try to infect you if you touched them. And you had to fight if a machine person manifested. We just called them machine babies, but it was like a version of you that was cybernetic and very demonically robotic. And it would have compressed frequencies that would just come flying out of its head and mouth. If it opened its mouth, and its eyes would start going bug-eyed, you'd get a very wicked grin on its face when you knew that it wasn't a person you thought it was. And the frequency would rapidly unfold like a zip file, and it would get harder to fight the faster it decompressed. It was like scalar weaponry came right out of this thing's head, and it would try to knock you on the ground. So those things were hard to fight at first, but we dealt with a few of those. So it would try to just like come at you, attack your head, squeeze your body, start talking robotic, and have these piercing sounds come out of it. That was not only your frequencies and signatures coming out of it, but interlaced and meshed with so many other things. There's no limit to what these beings were scheming and planning, because they hate you. Their eyes would kind of go like a REM type movement, because they had your DNA markers already in them as like a host port plugin. So I've had many nights fighting those and the AI in some kind of detention and retention units. And we all, if we were put in a certain place together, we would all dream the same dreams. We were very connected, hearing everything everyone was thinking about, like a Minority Report sometimes. So you'd have to get past the lies. You'd have to get past chips in clone heads, control ports, because it's like a dog whistle being called out, and your chain being yanked, trying to activate you at random intervals and control you on a shortened leash. And it disrupted our relationships with each other, and of course our alters did too. So it was challenging trying to be organically and originally you in your original body, while being constant and consistently mentally stable, not only with yourself but with each other, because we were also fighting amnesia this whole time too in the program, forgetting who you were even married to, thinking maybe you were British or being lied to and told you had a whole other life that they wanted you to accept. It's like sometimes we'd have to leave ourselves markers or notes like mazes when you had a chance to, knowing that you would find them or somebody else would too, reaching out at certain points somehow. Bringing things back full circle. Because they would try to make me think John was somebody else. And they do that with him a lot too. And they did that to me in England, and that's when I had a nervous breakdown and I lost it. And they made me take acid on the where the SSs went and got prospected and vetted on the farm, where crazy things always happened on that farm. So I ended up just having a knife in my hand. I was wanting to kill one of the members of the aristocracy, and Casbolt was outside. He ended up taking the knife out of my hand, and then ended up running to this big blue horse, because they had the blue horse heads, Pegasus heads, representing time travel at different geographical locations. So I just stood in front of the horse head, and I was thinking in my head, I'm going to jump over this horse head, and jump over the program and have victory over it. And we also had a thing where we said all the king's horses and all the king's men will one day put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So what happened after this, me and Jay were taken to Old Prairie Farm too, in different time periods in Overland. We'd go to see this guy upstairs called the Flying Dentist, Mr. Flyer, who would drug us in his chair. Then we'd be sitting by this huge fountain in front of this big white pillared mansion. One of the trainers would put me in a red sled outside. Another would speak to me by a wishing well, making me feel like I was a child and helpless. This was called the Ward Mansion. Lizards were sitting and living inside, trying to mind wipe you. There was these lion fountains that had water rushing out of their mouth. It was kind of like a debriefing that happened too out in the gardens, because somebody would be speaking sometimes in this botanical garden. And what they really were after at this point was my holographic retrieval ability, especially because me and Jay were this unstoppable pair, and we relied on that ability a lot to be able to go back and locate anything that had happened in the past and view it. Like I could go past a building and say, wait a minute, and I could see exactly what had happened in there. And then from point A to point M, I could retrace all of our steps very quickly. And our story is such a story that it's why things like 5 and 14 eyes exist today, so that there can be fair and reliable intelligence sharing through borders and agents. Because at the end, it was like all these different factions wanted not only to put a wedge between us and have us work against one another, but they also had a hit out from 2 different international intelligence agencies out on both of us. And the CIA at the end informed me that my only choice was to leave him on the one hand, but what they were offering me was just a slave hell deal. And it was just very shady parameters all the time and boundaries as to what you would be doing, what kind of life you would have. And we'd already been put through so much at this point, on and off world. So a lot of these very snaky beings just have become pieces of debris in the universal display already. And I saw a lot of things just get completely dismantled, overridden, halted, stopped, because of their scheming, because of their own noose that they trip up, and they end up hanging themselves on it as they shorten other people's rope. They break Torah, they break universal law. They suffer the consequences of the demands that they put on other people and the burdens, all the things that they contain and tried to control and withheld in the living word that's enfolded and packaged into all of creation. They don't listen to it, so they inevitably have to face the consequences of that and pay the price. Because when they ask us to do favors for them, it's because they had a limited ability to operate in this reality in a solidified and tangible way that we did and we could. So they used Oref and souls and certain hybrids in order to access realms and dimensions and get them things. So we figured that out right away, stopped doing favors for them in lieu of their lies and promises because it wasn't worth it in the end, because we saw that they're just empty. They can't give you what you want because they're existing in a void already, trying to come into this black hole system. They're lacking a state of non-life. They're in a state of non-life to begin with. So depending on their treachery for some sort of gain is redundant and counter effective to our hope of ever overcoming them. So we needed to do something different and to lay the groundwork and understand the grid work of keeping ourselves in tangents of original birth processes and timelines always, so that we could always override their intentions and desires with highest intent and highest truth and pure desire that came from the heart, because they don't have a heart to trump them and beat their game. They were trying to change universal laws and rules anyways, so we needed to understand what the Creator had to say about that, what the Creator's word is, what his word and all creation hangs on, which is his word, the foundation first we needed to grasp, so that we had that strong footing, so that didn't move, so we couldn't be shaken and abide in that and just live in this world of like unknown certainties and probabilities. Because it wasn't safe living like that anymore. It was always dangerous, and it was always on the edge with no clear compass. But the Word of God is the only compass and grounding point in all the dimensions you can view, and all the magnetic fields, all the things you can travel in the spirit with, underneath the firmament, as far as you are allowed to go. Still, the only thing that it ever even matters is his word and following the Good Shepherd. So you can't be taken out of his hand. Because the word and the law that came out of his mouth, which all creation hangs, was created for our protection as a boundary and a frequency type of fence. And it's here out of love. It's a tough, deserving, and respectful love, though. A tough love of a father. And these beings don't know that. They don't have it because they're completely cut off from that. And they think that since they live in the belly of the strong delusion and are already given over to the strong delusion in the abyss, they think that they can just come into any area and do whatever they want. And they can't, because they couldn't go where we could, nor did they have the creativity. So they stripped and drained everybody they came in contact with out of any amount and all the amounts of creativity that they could possibly get from them. And it's why they use our thoughts and siphonings and what I called the sleeping sickness and a dreamlike world in reality. And they channeled it out in times when we were distracted, so that they could piggyback on that, create a distortion pattern and a new pattern apart from the old original patterning, the pattern of heavenly things and earthly things that need to come together still, so that they could slip into that access point and speak into this reality as their platform. They wanted to create this harmonic resonance link with everyone's mind so that they could speak into and attack the minefield. Because they even need to use your voice sometimes. These beings are so pathetic. And we could touch artifacts and objects that they couldn't. We had holy blood. We could touch holy artifacts, and they couldn't because it would kill them. They just wanted to take those things and change them, and then just pervert and reverse the energies so that they could try to control them, because they want to kill everything. They can only view certain points and only use a limited amount of frequency control. Past that and past their artificial viewing of timelines, they can't see into what's completely in the higher states and organic. And then they're not able to harm you because they're like insects or parasites that are literally seeing in the dark, feeling in the dark, and stabbing in the dark. You have to repel them, rebuke them, and push them back. And even not interact, even with the appearance of evil. Because that's what they want, is your attention. Because then once you give them your attention, that mental thought link is formed, and then you give them your energy. So the more we learned about the true creative dynamics and kingdom authority and celestial mechanics, and divinity, and we were open to receive those teachings, and we prayed about them, the real, right, ancient path. Then we would sit by the river and places of nature. We would have peace. We would be full of the Spirit. We realized how to quantum jump layers and levels of spiritual freedom and liberty, and why these interdimensional experiences existed that we were having, how perfect love casts out all fear, how to get rid of our shadows. And we needed that renewal and that revival. And we really understood at a very young age, line upon line, precept upon precept, and how to beat the world's hardest game that made Ender's Game look like child's play at the end. And then we got to know the author of the Book of Life, since we were feeling trapped in the land of the lost or dead for so long, and he led us through out of the eye of the needle and the storm into the much greater, vaster, beautiful horizon, where we saw visions and clouds together. We traveled in the spirit together. We would hear angels sing. We had many ministerings of angels. We heard harps. We sang the Song of the Stars again. We heard from heaven, and it canceled out any past entrapment systems put into these various field programs that our minds had closure with in certain moments, like a case closed file, feeling fullness, contentment, what's done is done. We had waves of satisfaction inside of us. We had living bread and water many times out in nature, by rivers. We all prayed. We raised our voices. And we knew everything was seen and recorded on some level. Every tear was captured. We were never alone, not for 1 second. Doubt wasn't in our minds. Our minds were illuminated in all the recesses of them. The Father's voice sounded kind of like a mighty wind that always brought us back together to see and remember and witness each other's beautiful shining faces and what our true forms were. Because over time we would almost forget what we looked like because we were in so many different bodies. Me and Jay were then taken to the Topeka train depot after that ward mansion, and one time we got grabbed by these British groups, these funny dressed individuals. They take us in the train station. No one was there. It was just like us and them, like the Godflesh song. I'm put in a chair. He was in a chair across from me. A couple guys would come up the steps on the balcony and be yelling at you or saying something. One guy had checkered pants on, and he started choking me with his cane and trying to extract information. And I was just focusing on staring at this big griffin white clock that was on the wall, and then focused on certain techniques I learned to break free of these types of interrogation sessions. And we'd have like these onlookers on the balcony just staring down at us. We end up freeing ourselves. Our arms got free. We ended up grabbing the guy's cane, like Clockwork Orange style in there. Go outside. We beat the 3 guys with the cane. We made fun of their clothes. Then we go into the woods and try to relax. And starts raining, so then we had to get a hotel. And that's when 2 guys in suits showed up at the hotel. And at this point, Jay was addicted to certain pills that they had him on. And he was getting sick in the bathroom. And I, at this point, afterwards, was smoking a cigarette outside, trying not to act like my sister, because they had sinisterly switched me and my sister's bodies. And they can do that, this tech. That's why I had to be taken off this world, because it was so abusive. And it's cellular memory. And I was trying not to do her body movements, even though I was in her body. And it was really hard to not do that, because they switched me in my sister's body as a cruel ploy to get me to agree with their plans. So then I'm outside and I'm yelling at these 2 guys, telling them they have no idea what it's like, what we have been through. And I just dumbfound them, because I'm like, you have no idea what it's like being pulled out of the early 1900s after having just had a baby in a time period that you named, that are named after John, and then the next day having someone come in from the time travel program, extract you, and you're supposed to not have any feelings about it. I'm like, do you know what that's like? And they were dumbfounded. Like, of course not. We would never know that. Those were the things that happened in the time travel program that set us off, that messed us up. You can't just hide bury emotions. We weren't robots. I mean, we were happy in that time period. We didn't care if we stayed in that time period because we had perfect bodies anyways, and this great family in this town that had people making music, having fun. People loved us. We were on the third level of this hotel, just watching the town. We did so many good things. Then just somebody randomly comes in from the program and extracts you out. Like, oh, it's time to go now. Let's go do that. Come on. Like, this is what's going on. You have no say in it whatsoever. We just didn't like being treated like that anymore. We certainly were not empty. We had passion. We were misunderstood. We couldn't get over certain things, and it hurt to leave a baby in house in a different time period, or certain things that had happened in the program that they so coarsely ripped from your arms or ripped you away from. We left a baby all by himself. Even though we knew someone we knew, loved and trusted would eventually pick him up and take over a parental role, it still affects you in some way. But later on, we did end up seeing our son, and he was wise beyond his years. He had a deep soul that understood us, and we were okay with it because we had closure in this brief passing moment with him in time viewing, and I knew we'd see him in heaven because he lived a good life, almost like 100. John number 2, like Benjamin Button and other shows that they made out of real files. So after that, me, my sister, and John took a piece of the tech we had, and we did some soul calibration that we just came up with, and we stood together holding hands in a line outside by a certain bridge where a portal would open up, and we're holding hands. He was in the middle of us, and I could not bear being in my sister's body, and we felt this breath of spirit come through us, like full chills, and shift, and we were put back into place, into our bodies. So it was beyond a miracle, and we knew at that point that, okay, it's not the tech that's powerful, it's the spirit, and living in the spirit that's powerful, and the God that made our spirits behind this. So I ended up losing her in time too somewhere, but then we would find objects, and to protect ourselves, sometimes we would let our memories of finding these objects we had retrieved be erased because we didn't want them falling into the wrong hands. We called this period in our lives the angel quest. We had objects that we found from just out of this world, and we had these candlesticks in our backpacks that weren't really candlesticks, and they started glowing like they were on fire, and we loved these things. It was very energizing. They were warm. We didn't have any coldness. We didn't get hungry. We didn't get thirsty. We were like totally fulfilled and energized. We had these objects, and we wrote in the journals of what they were, and we buried a lot of things and hid them all over the place. We named these relics. Sometimes we hid them in the past even, or the future reference points. We had certain like handheld balls that you could they could morph and heal you, and then I could put them over my eyes when you get headaches. Some of these objects we could I could put to my ears, and I would hear like certain singing coming off of them even. So we were in the bathroom of the hotel. At this point, we knew that we were like in a, I don't know, like a dead end road, and we were being hunted. We would be killed if we didn't do something drastic. So we were sick of being used, jerked around. He puts his hands on my face. We both say to each other, like out loud, what our facial features are. We were crying. We made sure we remembered that we both had sharp blue eyes, that we loved each other. And there was nexus points that we saw that we would come back to in fluent time jumps, like endpoints into this higher plan for full circle timeline integration in 2020. And before this, they were using us for jumps off of the bridge on Boulevard Lane. back in time, and this had many swinging clocks and that were hanging off of this bridge before the cobblestone. Or at one point, it was cobblestone. And we would speed up our buggy in these old-fashioned cars. There was heavy tech rigged under the bridge and the columns through the Watts Company and through all the abandoned buildings around it, and through the railroad. It was also part of this. And you'd hear this crackling and this shine, this bright white light as we were gaining speed. And we'd see these lights strung up by this hanging clock start to pulse, and it looked like things were going to start melting on acid in this scene. And you just know, like on a roller coaster, you're going to hit this point. So then I looked down and see this pink building. I knew it was coming. The railroad and switchboards were also full of the tech. People were in position. I know that the time wall portal was going to open soon. You'd feel like we were going to jump into this ocean wave. So it was exciting and scary at the same time because there's so many multifaceted, inexplicable unknowns that you didn't quite understand, and your mind would like start quickening at that moment too. And I could understand all of this in certain moments and epiphanies to verbally and linguistically express things and mathematics and physics beyond this world. Because sometimes we felt far more ingenious than what we had felt before. Because sometimes we felt like we were like two autistic people sitting there, not able to express what we knew. And then we were given a voice certain times to be able to do that. So it was like time slips we felt. And we'd see this like event horizon, sideways, side reel, like a 360 advantage point. And we felt kind of like eagles then. It was like information that was translated into celestial mechanics that we could see and feel in front of each other sometimes and touch in the air between us. So each time we went through the time wall, I would feel a little almost joy sometimes. Then I would make this different noise or shout each time that we crossed. And it looked like this watery square had formed to the other clocks in the middle of the bridge. Like we went into more of a cube than a portal plasma field. And it had this like orangish creamsicle light filaments that would scatter into these particle ray dispensions. Sometimes your heart would hurt afterwards, and it took a minute for your brain to get back its bearings and to walk right. We'd get off the buggy. Immediately, we had black cloths put over our heads. We were pushed into vehicles under the bridge on the other side. And it started getting scarier each time because you didn't know who you were going to be grabbed by, because it always seemed like it was somebody different. And then I knew this time wall was like a mirror somehow because we were the same on the other side usually. Like we called it this boomerang that we could throw through it and always find each other, or the catcher's mitt, I would call it. It would always return to you. So this ended up getting tedious and uncomfortable and forceful each time we went over. Then we started going through these scenarios where they would put the black bags over our heads, push us into black cars over the bridge, being tortured eventually into these interrogation sessions. Like, where is it? Where is the object? And then we wouldn't remember where we buried things. We're like, I don't know what you're talking about. We're being suffocated in the cars. You couldn't see. You couldn't breathe. You'd start kicking, trying to break the windows out. You'd have to act fast because they would like literally try to start choking you. And you wouldn't want them to cuff your hands. You'd have to headbutt them, get your hands free. We'd have to help each other and save each other in these experiences sometimes, what they escalated into. It was like blind shots. We were like blindsided sometimes by these cheap shots. So it was a shuffle, and things would come at us from many directions is what happened. We were barely able to speak afterwards sometimes because it was traumatizing. So it got complicated and complex, and their mind games continued. Then they started making versions of him out of his DNA. They made 4 Johns from 1966, and my handlers even they made out of him, and tried to torture me with his image. They showed me a picture of the 4 Johns, and then I saw how their futures would end up. So in the end, we just didn't trust anyone. And then we ended up being at this racetrack area with a lot of these tools we had and this crazy plan, because these tools were very coveted. And we get into this black car, and John's skin, whatever he was holding, fidgeting with in his hand, it made his skin look purplish, the hue that was cast on it. And then his skin looked darker. And I'm like, put your head down, Black Jack, with his hat. And I was just dying laughing inside because we had to be so serious. I especially did, to stay still, because I had this blurring tech in my lap that would mask your body. So I kind of looked like a Slender Woman, but he looked like the purple Blackjack, I called him. We had all the goods. We had everything in our bag that they wanted. And we got it right. And I'm like, okay, hold it right there. And then I put on my poker face. But I was so giddy inside, it's just like I was going to burst. And we drove out of this area and disappeared. And it was like a joy of riding into the sun, into this portal, because it was more like a cloud, it felt like. Sometimes we felt like we were walking on a cloud when we could do certain things together. And it's like we had a race with the tech. We called ourselves Celestial Paladins, because I also called myself that at this triangle point in Redding's Mill, where they also did experiments on us and made us the outlaws from nowhere that sent us on missions. We could see into the future, so we knew what they were trying to do. Yahoveh ended up halting their plans. We had to take the tech off world. It wasn't allowed anymore because of all its abuses, and the AI itself wanted to recreate a reality, its own reality with it, without God. And of course, it's going to fail in those plans and evil thoughts. So CERN and all of its back projects it has been shut down several times. So the world will never really know the way the time travel project was at its beginnings. Only its survivors really do, because they were born at a certain juncture in time to stop it, and did, and then they carry on its remnants. And what's left over in a 23-year time loop is a lot of fragments, and a lot of just fragments of disinfo about it that got scattered all over the internet. And CERN and what it's doing with its type of time travel program that it can't really get any energy to do like it had back then is different, because they're trying to like resurrect the pit and use the head of Osiris, like they use certain families' DNA like mine to create movie star clone actors and other things. What we're going to see, I think, is coming in to the perfection of the beast tech now, not so much the time travel program, just the image of the beast, though it's trying to rise up. So in spite of that, and cause and effect of that, we're going to see plagues and things in Revelations unfolding before the earth's judge. Because CERN and programs like that, they just grasp in the dark. And movies like Interstellar show are just like questions that the AI would ask. But they don't understand that time doesn't really work like that. And that certain mechanisms were sealed off from those who would use knowledge to twist and contort it like they do the scriptures, instead of just submitting and asking the King of the universe for what his pure truth and knowledge is, to replace their own, so that they come into a higher understanding. Because there's so many vast conceptions of life, and its abundance and its rhythms and its wave functions and its beautiful orchestrations are far beyond what we know, or very different from what we think is right or perceive. And the mathematics are changing. They're dying out. They can't gain enough energy to ever reach the firmament, so they try other things to escape reality and take souls into their hijacked false reality. So then, as we were lone rangers in the end, this entity called Ronan appeared to us at the end, and it would speak through the AI voice and say things like, just give up out of the sky and try to push like a suicidal spirit on us when we were down and being hunted by these interdimensionals. And it would pick up on our plans somehow internally and say things like, oh, you're so linear, or try to make us think that we couldn't do it at the end. And because our minds were being very opened to what God's plans were and how he was going to take the time travel program and dismantle it himself. But we knew how much we were capable of in the universe, and we weren't going to listen to that spirit of doubt. Nothing it said worked anyways. We continued. We knew we'd find a way out. It's the stalking protocol sway thing that happened in 1995. And on his way out, when Jay did the time jump wall, he let his guard down for a second because he just kind of let himself get low energy and depressed. And this entity was actually waiting for an opening. And right before we went through the time wall, I see this thing manifest and grab him when he jumped forward and I jumped backwards. We did this like time arc split 2 ways. And I saw like a parasitic demon tick or something like latch onto him. And these are astral stragglers that speaks blasphemies. And it was like he went through like a little tunnel of gnats. And I just wanted to get out like my spiritual fly swatter at that moment. But it was too late because we both were split and gone. Those entities are so limited still. They have a seared consciousness. They have filthy eyes. It's just bits and pieces that catch a ride where it can, and it has some pathetic limited view or scope of its our current situation that it was always trying to stalk or map out. And it's the reason why we need the full garments on and our full spiritual armor, so that we have a shield and a buckler at all times and these tools to cut through any ungodly soul ties, lies, and illusions. Because they'll sweep in like a vulture. And that's what I saw when I left his side and our soul ratio split. I knew somewhere, though, that he would be okay in the end and work out his own entanglements and tangos with the devil. And he'd be totally free of any of these parasitic things if he just remembered his last sight of potentiality. Because these beings hate it when they know that you have a high encounter with the Most High. So then they stalk, they seek to steal, kill, and destroy any thought of you even advancing, because they know that your power getting so high up renders them completely powerless. And you can just mute their mouths and shut them up. They have to cease and desist their campaigns and assaults and harassments completely, and they will flee in your presence when you're spirit-filled. So then we go back to the hotel. We have an encounter with God. We have angelic tech in our hands, and we are like grid keeper, grid molders. We put our hands together. We get taken in the spirit. We see beautiful things. The tech is morphing on its own into a sphere even. We touch the sacred space like a spectral rainbow astrolabe, golden light that's all around us. We go into the tachyon fields together. We see circuits of the sun, universal blueprints, the demise of the black sun. We're taken up into God's high and holy mountain. We step up into much, much higher matter, much, much higher mathematics. We see totally above and beyond, like in a time bubble, outside of time and space, what would become of the time travel program and all of the context and the design and the details of it that we couldn't see before. And we see ourselves in our pure forms for what we were. We were fully healed at the end. We were fully whole. We would draw symbols and languages together, speak in different ways that was abstract and based in pointillism. We'd plateau into seeing this metal that we were holding forming spheres and have pinging sounds coming from it. It would just levitate in the air in front of us. My body could just disappear out of the chair, go into future parallelities, check out what's going to happen, come back and report. Jay would write it down. We could make plans that way. We could communicate, send each other data streams, quantum data streams, see nexus points and things into many other worlds and probabilities. What was most beneficial in our current consciousness, future consciousness, and even how to communicate with our past consciousness and our situational movements. We talked very advanced for hours. Our mouths and our bodies were not even controlled by us at that point. It was pure sessions of what we called flow between us. And it was encounters with the angelic. We were like clay vessels ourselves being molded in these moments. And it was very pure. We would cry sometimes. We were a cloud of witnesses. We would see celestials. We would be taken into certain places on the high and holy mountain and Tachyon fields, see the lightning, the thunder. We saw all the damage erased from ourselves. We were literally up in the Mount of Congregation. And any blemishes or black spots in the air, even between us, which became ozone and totally purified, was dissipated and dissolved. It smelled like morning dew in that room. And it was so heavenly that those apertures, that if somebody would have walked in that room right now, they would have died because they would not have been able to hold that frequency. When you come closer to the throne or to the presence of the Lord, and you have to fall on your face because there's this fear that overcomes you, like you'll die because it's so holy. So he laid out the plans and the blueprints and showed us and opened up our minds to all sorts of things. When we would meet again, when we would recognize signatures again, repattern everything, even down to certain visuals that we would see to retain our original selves and memories and experiences before the split, and preserve each other throughout what was being overwritten. And we kept a part of us, who we were, location points, like resetting ourselves, like a continuum of what was, what always has been between us. And we allowed opportune improvements to what would be. It was this crazy, crazy plan, but we called it the catcher's mitt, the boomerang. Where we lost ourselves, we would find ourselves. And even in times where they tried to just dump us like garbage into interdimensionality and whatever things they came up with the tech, we were always found. And we were always found by angelics, knowing that we had protectors beyond time and space. Because there is a creator that watches everything and anything that happens, and nothing does not happen here without his knowledge of it outside of time and space. So I go in the future, I see a younger version of himself, things and plans that we made in the future, because we could just quantumly entangle and teleport from one place to place. I end up fighting one of the machine babies that they made out of him, because somehow they would tag us even into the end. And I'd come back to the hotel chair and tell them what I saw. So we'd have to recalibrate and change certain things so that they couldn't see us or follow us or tag us, these junction spots. And crossing these null zones. Because he was very awake at this point. And before, he was struggling with that sleeping sickness, because he would be taken in black cars by the railroad tracks or trains. He was always just going from one place to another, and they would actually give him injections in his arm of this yellow fluid if they could make him fall asleep with its frequencies. So we had to have a lot of trust in each other, which happened to fully come into fruition at the end. And we made evident of things that worked together for our greater good and for the good of all. He had the ability to view into even births or deaths across lifespans and cross points with great precision. We made agreements to meet at certain crossroads weaving things in like a time synchronistic loop carefully. Because if you push certain time scenarios, it doesn't go well. So it had to be of a divine origin. Um, there's all these shady factions, and we ended up tricking them. It was a fall day. I went out of the time well with a smile on my face, saying Stargate 7 over and out as my sign off. We split. Uh, we did the best we could under extenuating circumstances. I knew his soul was tied with mine. His existence was imprinted within me forever. It would come back full circle, face to face again. And all the things that they offered us never really compared to what we knew was the greater prizes, the greater treasures in heaven. We had literally overcome, seen, confronted, and conquered through Christ every human evil we could think of, known to man, especially the Draco base train station. He was usually a blonde haired boy at first. But what happened is we retained integrity in ourselves because we're primes. They could never hack us no matter how much they tried. So it's why they created hybrid forms from us, um, machine babies with counterfeit DNA versions because that's all they could access, which isn't our DNA or the prime sanctum. It's an attempted copy that's then hybridized. So these beings basically, okay, they push the limits of the tech to inhumane crimes against humanity levels, splicing things here and there, trying to create all these other things, trying to create their own reality, manipulating crowds, dreamscapes, the intellectual vault thefts, intellectual property vaults. So they also were doing these recon groups with kids. Um, we learned how to speak to each other in codes, how to understand each other's internal struggle, what we were dealing with inside. Then they put us in a 1939 movie of Jesse James. Some of the clone bodies, they had cameras in the eyes. You really didn't have any privacy. Then they brought us to a place where there was a dam. Um, they had some type of water beast in there too another time that I had to learn to stay calm in the water or being chased through the woods at night. Back at the castle, they had us chased by wolves at night too. Then they had us use some type of like Tesla tech to electrocute us or try to invoke some type of EM plasma discharge, and then somebody would be outside taking a picture of what arced out of the building at night if we could create rainbows together. Um, and another time in the castle, we ended up becoming organic Baghdad batteries together because we knew that we had to take a stand, and that we were not going to be drained. We were not going to feed off humans. We were not going to be part of this vampire clan that took advantage of us and our amnesia to control us, because we were told later that they feared us, these ancient clavins of cavaliers and vampire clans, because we had the ability to kill them the whole time. So then these ancient clans, once they couldn't recruit us, I guess, they just tried to use us as like a weapon, to be put in the middle of like a world war, the heart of like a worldwide vampire war. And at first it was like they were like the original dorks of Dungeons and Dragons, calling themselves the Clavins and the Claviteers. And I made fun of them and said, like, what are you guys, a softball team? But their hands moved strangely. They were very odd group of people. We beat them and the Wizards of Oz. There's many secrets in the Clavins that they still try to control and covet. They told us our blood was renowned, holy, and a secret. That's why all the Clavins feared us, like the Vatican secret. So we said no to that. We ascended to a different level. I felt my mouth open up in the castle. A sound came out. Light came bursting out of my eyes, like a gamma light flash filled the entire castle in that part. Somebody took a picture of it outside. It was pure white light, like in all of our cells. I activated Jay, who was standing next to me, and it's like we were on a cloud of ozone again. The clan fell. People like combusted. There was like a few cockroaches of the vampires left, fumbling on the floor and on the door on our way out. They had lied to us, told us they were going to give us their castle. So we just kind of like wrecked the whole energy signature there so that they couldn't go back there. We screwed up the whole castle's habitation for them. So then they started building these other castles, and they brought us there too. Another time they brought us with this kid that we ended up calling the Flash, that had curly dark hair and big red lips. They sent us through some time tunnels in history to retrieve objects. We almost didn't make it back to the portal in the forest and just barely got in within a few seconds. The other kid, Evan, didn't make it. They used that against us to say it shifted us into a whole new level of responsibility. Thinking, okay, we're going to be trapped or disposed of or lost back in time through this tunnel. But I saw this like 5-year weird formulation that was like calculus multiplying by 5, that he would come out at a certain point. And this was in Yellville, Missouri. We're all yelling at each other. He was somebody's brother. We were almost fighting with everybody there. This lizard man wanted to break my neck for not following orders. I wasn't wanting to cooperate with a lot of things. Then at the Sky High Castle, they made me and Jay sit outside at night and told us that our eyes were owl eyes. And we could barely move our necks or our bodies, and we were just supposed to stare into the woods. And we'd talk each other through certain scary situations like this until we could move our heads and our eyes. And a lot of times they kept us outside until sunrise, until the sun came up in the morning. Another time they had me placed in a scenario down in Redding's Mill where this lizard man was placing bodies of children behind this large cement wall dam by this wood pile. So then I had to watch him up from high off of these steps and had to end that scenario. Cutthroat. Another time they had us in an old abandoned pool mansion. They would fill it up with water. A reptilian handler would dose our drinks. We would talk to him, and he would try to lure us into a reversal upside down world where we would feel like we were underneath the water sinking. And they would actually put things in the water, like a little alligator or a shark or something. We thought we were fighting with humans and hybrids and animals underneath the water. And it was all surrounded by steel fences. So I'm like grabbing the bars, trying to crawl up. I eventually realized I wasn't stuck underneath the water, and I stood up and broke that illusion and that mind control. So we called that the upside down world because everything would reflect in the water from the area we were sitting in. Then I ended up throwing all these bricks at the things that I was fighting with in there. And then they couldn't make us fight in this pool that they filled up anymore because we stood above it and we wouldn't participate in it anymore. And the gazebo is where it all started at after midnight. Then we were taken to movie theaters. His father was named Horton. Why the movie Horton Here's a Who comes around, he would never say my name. I would always try to defend Jay. He had left him in houses. He had brought him to um, movie theaters with people that were in cults, and we would end up fighting with Horton. I would get taken away from him. We'd get separated even as kids. I'd say, like, don't worry, you'll remember me. Remember, like, my hair color or different things. We'd give each other drawings, coloring book pages and stuff. I would stomp around outside when they would separate me from him and like try to activate the superpower or something and wave my arm around and say like, Horton, you hear me? And threaten him because I was a Subaru. So it was this little joke that him and his buddies made up, Horton Here's a Who, out of all my antics that I did. So we were mocked a lot as children, but then they had repercussions come from them from that. What ended up happening, we didn't give in to their vampire games. I got taken to a castle. It was just being built. I saw what they were doing to Jay. I saw the marks in his arms, how they were trying to feed off of him, trying to tell him he was part of an ancient vampire clan. He wasn't buying it. Um, I go outside. This was sunrise. I had planned it that way. I was going to tell them I was going to join when I really wasn't. And I grab a piece of wooden fence. They all come back outside in the parking lot. And they come out, and then I ended up just jumping off of this fence and beating them with this piece of wood from the fencing. Godspeed, and their legs are broken. They're laying down there. I grab their Rolls Royce. I go down the road. I take it away. Then I got apprehended in the next town. But it was a very freedom, liberty fulfilling moment. Because the vampire people, they always smelled like mothballs, and they were very strange. And some of them were cross dressers too, who would wear lipstick and try to like lure a kid into thinking that a he was a she and a woman, to hurt them. We also had a group of 12 originally that would time travel. We would go to this Holy Cross walk into Jesse James Cave. We went into a white crystal cave by a white crystal diner. And the white crystal was of way more importance than the movie they made called The Black Crystal. And we went into this cave that had been sealed for 85 years. There was also another ancient vampire clan that lived in the Bluff Dwellers caves, which were houses inside of the cliff systems. And they were a bunch of very weird people. And they had someone that would stand outside in this old suit. And nobody ever visited this cave. And he would just stand outside. You would see him every time. We'd go in there. They thought they had a stronghold. Once we got into the cave, they would ask us to do things for them. And if we didn't, then they would put out this frequency like you were going to faint. Let's see. Me and Rink, once we got sent back into Diamond, we helped the African American people there that were slaves in the fields from being attacked by these albino, vampiric looking old men who were masons who took the oath to either become a vampire or a werewolf. They were bloodthirsty, and they were watching these people at night. And they would come out at dusk in the field, like some type of guerrilla warfare. So they were watching these slaves in the field. They come out at dusk. We were already waiting for them though, so it was like a surprise attack. One of the guys was a slave owner, and he sounded crazy, like these people were meat to him or something, and he wanted like this tough fight or something with them. So Rink, he holds his ground pretty well. The slave owner was named Mr. Carver, and he would have this like club hand because he's like this hybrid being. So we ended up carving off his club hand, putting him down, like cutting off his claw or something. Then after that, they gave us these special bullets made out of this metal. So then we just in and out very fast. Wasn't a challenge anymore. Wasn't even messy hardly. We also went to Ulysses S. Grant's house and convinced him about the importance of George Washington Carver and helped bridge the gap between racial understanding. So he became the first Christian scientist with advancements in his field. We also made this Indian man rich and diverted from the script sometimes and did things like that. We healed water in around Pineville, Missouri, and everybody would come and be healed in this creek water and just put their face down and drink it every morning. And they thought it was a miracle. And they bottled this water and they put it in the pharmacy even. They called it the healing water. We went to Thief Hollow Branch, Rushing Springs, the Strawberry Fields Forever, Sugarland Camp, many, many cave systems. We ended up at a vampire's house in a black buggy once. He was a reverend of the town that actually had a backstory of killing his family, taking a masonic oath, becoming a vampire. And we drop off or pick something up from his house. And he turned around from his fireplace mantle the first time I went in there, and he would just stare at Jay. But this time he opened this little box in front of me. I see this puff for this green smoke emanating out of it. I felt choking instantly, like it was a brain disrupting hormone or something. So I start crawling on the floor. I feel muscle paralysis up to my neck. Then I'm stumbling back outside onto this carriage steps, trying to get back in this black buggy while this lunatic in this suit was just outside in the dark staring at us in his driveway like meat or something. And then you would block out his sound from your head, and these wolves would start coming down the hill. And it was just pitch black out here too. Just these little house lanterns were lit up. Nothing on this road. So then we got into this buggy. I ended up like hitting my head on the back of it as we hightailed it out of there, like lickety split, giddy up, out of sight, out of mind. And that was a joke between us for a long time. Very creepy, to say the least. These dead energy zones we dealt with. When then we joked about like him biting the horse's legs if we came back. So we were thrown into the middle of a lot of this type of supernatural things and time travel. Then it was a joke because later on in another decade, they had put a 2 Sons camp sign out across the street. So we laughed at the irony of that for years and hightailing it out of the Reverend Vampire's house in a buggy. But the next time we were able to repel him more effectively. His sleight of hand coat tricks that he had up his sleeve. We became skilled hunters in many of these fields. Another time we were sent into this cobblestone looking barn-like building on Washington Avenue. And it looked like there was peasants there. It's same scenario. I'd be in like this blue and white pilgrim looking dress in a blue house with white pillars on the porch. I go into the building, see a guy sitting on a chair in the corner. He would start talking to me, start shifting. He'd cast his shadow and stand up. I would fall off my chair. He would be furiously raging because he couldn't kill me. He would turn into a werewolf. There was blood all over the walls, high levels of copper in the air, thick violence and carnage. Each time I'd go through this scenario, a horse would come out the window in the front, jumping out. I'd fall into the grass outside. Um, then the werewolf would come by the window, start throwing bodies out. He would scream like he was being tortured every second. Then the third time, there was horses, men with torches, different approaches of attack. Eventually, this werewolf was killed. All of the bodies were piled up to the left of the house by these trees. They had this sick, large bonfire all night long that had left this huge, big black mark on the lawn. And the place got consecrated. And it felt like a Templar war or something. And I was just asking myself, like, is this ever going to end? I mean, because it was so heavy as you looked at this blackness and this werewolf face that was just like melting, falling off like tar off this burning stake, like hairy tar falling off. And somewhere in my mind, I knew like there was a flip side to this. And I started seeing, because you could hear people crying around you. And I just started seeing in replacement of that werewolf, Yahushua on the cross instead. As daybreak was drawing closer and these black sparks and blood were crisping and crackling in the air and slopping off, instead I started seeing Yahushua transcend and transform the weight of situations like this and the images of sin and death and the penalty of sin and death that was nailed to the cross instead. So I was starting to see into this like multi-dimensional funnel behind Yahushua that went right through his entire being, that branded him as the curse in that one quintessential moment that all creation knew at that cross point, and that all will witness fully one day. And I realized that he was the life in our blood that covers our blood and all these things, these heavy things, and these oppressive things that you don't want to look at. So, including this thing that this beast had committed. And I realized at that point that the Savior is the only highest alchemical process there was on earth, who is spotless and blameless before the presence of the Holy One, and nothing can stand against. And not one of us is righteous except for him who made himself the Word made flesh. And he's the literal boundary of the universe, his garments that were rent inside and out, as the temple, the fabric of all space and time, that canopy and that curtain that hangs, that all life hangs upon, since he created it all. So he's worthy of it all and the outline of it all. So as this werewolf was burning in front of us, it felt like a crusade war, doing holy work, doing these reversal patterns for some grid-laced, universal time continuum plan of these secret soldiers that were sent in to actually do good. And then it meant something. And none of this that we had endured and went through was in vain at that moment. Even though we were still imprisoned by certain interdimensional, and it was putrid, and this black smoke was rising, at the end I got to see the purification process that came out of it when the sun came and just touched the whole area, like scorched it. It was like all of that just went right up into the sunshine. Birds started chirping, and it totally got transformed. We were also in these ghost recon things and abandoned mines. Lizard men were in the mines. They would throw kids in the mines to fight with them on these bridges. Rush Creek, we went to the Hollows, Barney Hollows, Cold Spring Hollows. They made a lot of video games about this stuff. We had a lot of bloody battles in a lot of these abandoned areas and cement slabs and fighting arenas. The very end, we saw a place called Calico. We saw these old man vampire wars, and they would come out of these buildings and they would be like hissing like cats, coming out like sneakily at these reptilians that they had in the place too. And the reptilians would always come out of this green mist and out of these like green leafy shadows of these buildings. It was like an old west abandoned movie playing out. And at that point, it was like we were watching a sloth fight at the end because the vampires would bite the reptilians. Very interesting fight. if they didn't throw them down the street. Then the reptilians would just slow down like they were being drugged, and then both sides would just slowly tear into each other until they both um, passed out, or we would step in and just end it. And very gruesome and surreal in certain moments. So then we'd run down the creeks. We knew the cave systems. We were always threatened to, they were going to just leave us overnight in these abandoned lizard villages. They told us they could smell us. They put us in these situations, and it was like almost like cloaking technology was around some of these because nobody ever heard anything, or else people in the outlining village were probably part of it and under some type of mind control themselves. Um, Rush Creek is where the Dragon Lady poured oil into our eyes. Um, we called her a bitch. We were very angry. We ended up having to walk all the way down this other creek system and go to Needle Point Waterfall, where we washed our eyes out more. There was a bubbling spring in this area that almost looked like it was coming up from like a inflated inner tube, and we would always go and talk at that point and drink from this bubbling spring. There was always those chimneys everywhere. We had moments where we could just have fun and be kids and play. So at the end of this Calico episode, we called ourselves the Cataclysmic Calico Crew. And then we could sit on these bluffs and watch the white river on these bluffs. And of course, there was trains there. It was always where there was trains. They locked me in a jail once, and I saw a green mist come out and the reptilians manifest. I had to fight a big male reptilian in that jail cell once. The most infested place was this funeral home that they came out of, that they started manifesting in because they were feeding off of all that dead energy in the funeral home. That ended up being a bloodbath there. I had this Australian trainer because prior to this, there was a huge event in 1977 in Australia. There's many days of many people being actually covered in blood and other Stargate openings, high-ranking officials, celebrities. This Australian trainer was like a roly-poly guy, and he called us the Calico Crew, but he treated us more like we were like a pack of dogs or something. Like, go get him, and had us scaling rooftops and ledges and walls and battling these things, and giving us weapons at Pepper Sauce Alley. He called us the Killian's Dog Chow Roundup Crew because there was a building named that there, and he'd make jokes. Like we were almost in competition to like go back to where he was at his post in this abandoned building top level and get the flag. So after the old vampire men fought with the lizard men, it was this, we felt this epic victory because I was waving the flag down and yelling at people at the end. Like I was the first one to get up there. So a lot of these places and all these abandoned places, they took us in the middle of America all over. And these ghost towns haunted us for a very long time. And the trains and a lot of vehicles and rail systems that we were very familiar with. Because to us, it felt like interdimensional time jumping, but the places and what they did are all very physical, tangible places. They just confuse you, so you try not to remember where it was. But we had the ability to extract holographic data and to trace our steps, create timestamps, and to always come back to the truth of what was being done to us and what happened to us, and the kidnapping and the whole spectrum reality of it all. And then make their threats void, knock them off their power bases, learn how to hide from them, code things into ourselves, make our own type of cloud streaming, know that we did not need any type of AI. We didn't even need chakras. You just have the direct divine link, and that's all you need. We hid space material, angelic relics we found and collected that were teaching us things and helping us shape our lives in an advantage point for goodness. We didn't want many things falling into malevolent hands. That's why the time travel program was stopped back then. We had many precious moments throughout these adventures. We learned planetary languages. We had our mental faculties raised to like excavation points and activation points. We didn't feel godlike with it or anything. It was just a pureness to it and a sense of responsibility. Like a grace period is what it felt like. And the blessing of communicating with angels just made it all worth it in itself in just certain instances. Also, at the very end, there was a blonde-haired lady who was an NSA psychic. She was a Kino loyal. She thought she was the world's greatest psychic. She pretended to help us, but she really wasn't. She was trained by the NSA. She had lost a person who she thought was her husband, created possibly out of John's DNA. She was tracking us, thinking that we were the answer to her problems, like where's Waldo's sister on this bloodhound hunt. She wouldn't leave us alone. She was obsessed with like her own little maze and mapping out to follow us wherever we went. And she even at the end tried to offer us things in the astral shop she had, like a Peanuts comic shop. But she ended up selling us out at the hotel we were staying at. She would give up our location when she would find us. I was fighting with her outside, yelling at her. We just realized, at first we felt kind of sorry for her, but we realized we couldn't help her because she had betrayed us. Because we were literally homeless and being hunted at the end of all of this. And we had each other, though. We had a lot of bags, tricks, and secrets on our way out, though. And so much the AI stalking and the evil that was stalking us lost so much and didn't retain much information, actually. So much got lost in sketches and hypothesis, like the movie 23 and other amalgamated attempts to put a piece of a puzzle together that's out of context in this world's eye, because Abba concealed many things for his own purposes and reasons so that things would not be found, and things that we experienced he knew were highly coveted, so he protected us even from ourselves for his greater plans. Because time was like an experiment to him. He knows every hair that falls off our heads, everything that goes on in movement. Everything his eyes know that are like burning lamps that search out this earth and are ever wandering. Because he's the sovereign one, the beginning, the end, the Alpha and the Omega, everything under the sun. And above the sun, nothing's new underneath the sun. So he knew the plans of our enemies. He knocked them off their bases and their fake thrones. All our psychic trackers threw them off. We knew we weren't as easy marks as what they thought, because we had a big Father watching and covering us under the shelter of his wings. We were actually literally at the end brought up into Psalms 91 and saw what it's like to be up in that high and holy mountain, just like he took the prophets of old up there. What he shows you, what he puts inside of you, he'll make sure to bring out for his glory, honor, and purposes, though. We even saw the Lamb enthroned above the firmament outside of time and space as this universal symbol of salvation, sacrifice, and epitome of purity and love, like the dove, the ruach, the messenger, and the comfort of all. That's behind that Lamb, which the true gospel sits on. It's just untainted, immaculately exquisite, and in awesome splendor. And none is beside him. So people who came into contact with the tech we found sometimes got addicted. Their wicked desires got the best of them. Their hearts got corrupted. They became rotten. And 2036 was just a boundary barrier nodal point in our circle maps. And nobody was actually referenced there. We weren't commissioned and sent through. We were commissioned and sent through to come back together to finish our mission, basically. And people tried to follow us, but the trail we left is divinely concealed in such a way that no one can ever trace it except the mathematician like mind of God itself and himself. Not the best psychic in the world can know the plans of Yah, because spirits are only dealing with the terrestrial still. And in their disconnect with Source, they're in the dark, not seeing and walking in the light. And we got to the point where we could just wake up in a place together and walk out of a place together, making hundreds of people scatter in fear and break AI's faces down, anything it tried to imprint on us or display to us, become in sync with the higher purpose. I could even put my hand over his face sometimes and say, like, patch 36, or let him know like how many times it would take for us to be able to beat certain situations or scenarios so that we could advance in our understanding and what we're capable of. Then we could see into multiple features and futures, and it would make us feel good and grounded. The more we would be brought up into our higher selves and utilize our inner gifts and spirits to have good fruit, not bad fruit. Because we saw the spirits, the fruit of the spirits literally bud in front of us in the tree of life, the angelic stations. We were taken to various spots on that high and holy mountain. We heard what's behind the thunder, what's behind the lightning, what's behind the judgments. And we received gifts from heaven, and it anointed us to the point where we looked really young. We had this golden glow to us. And we felt like our innocence had returned too. We were reformed into the image we were intended to be. It was a sweet surrender. And we knew that nothing the world could offer meant anything compared to the sweet taste and relationship of holiness and what it can teach you. And then you learn to see love in a whole new light. So that's how the Lord led us out to encounter ourselves, aspects of the divine, new beginnings, new dawns, new vistas, new avenues, new horizons. We were like a secret event that happened in the world that no one seemed to notice. We didn't need to chase our own shadows anymore or try to jump over them. We were just careening into clearer waters like sailing ships, with heavenly integers and outliers in a border maze holding us together. Abba himself was the one that took the time travel tech and program and beat it because of his graces and mercies that he shed upon us and this world and delivered us from it and its grasps. All that we had been through, the dimensions, been exposed to, been trapped in, and all of its workings. We knew that at the end it was just in his hands. And we laid it all down at the cross and let go of all of it and everything that we had held on to and just surrendered to heaven's will. And because of that, you get flooded with his impartation of spirit and know that you're cared for and nurtured by angels. And what happened, we would never have to experience again or go through. It would never be allowed to happen again. And many factions still don't know what many of the kids did or the completeness of their stories or files, and they never will, because we ourselves sometimes allowed ourselves to be memory erased, to conceal what we had hidden from their prying eyes and their thievery plots. They can only operate in the shadows. It has to be precise for them by using you as a manifestation template or host and vessels. So you stop doing favors for them. They don't get a foothold on this reality. They don't enter at random and tandem. You don't listen to their lies and cut through their disguises with the sword of the spirit. And then you eradicate their psychologically damning creations and scars and wounds they create in you and your psyche. And their creations that they made out of you and others also lose power. Their tools weren't effective anymore because we knew that at the end we walked in kingdom authority to shut the mouths of the arc AI demons in the sky that were literally stalking us in the sky, desert demons, the whole lot of them. we could just say leave, and they would flee from us. We eradicated their legions. Abba helped us beat the world's hardest game by showing us that they can only see the artificial streams, but we could see the real schematics to prepare a hope and a future for us that came from him. And then we knew we weren't on sinking sand anymore. You could pierce through the veils because our hearts were willing to sacrifice all of what we were and knew to be for heaven's sake, which is a higher will and a higher power. So he preserved our lives because of our choices and our consciousness, and shielded our minds and solidified our minds and our soul apparatus for his purposes and plans instead. And then he sent the time travel tormentors spiraling into oblivion. So what's left of the old program now is bits and pieces that try to reformulate and revamp, of course, but all of its unsold couplings of AI remnants that hitchhiked a ride in that time portal is just still just fragments. They have no power or grasp with the highest reality that holds everything together still. And how Abba knows the universe to be. So in the end, we were fully loved, fully filled, fully healed, refined in a Christic light, not hidden in foreign bodies anymore that we needed to peruse over our scars with and try to understand a different makeup than what we knew we were constitutionally made of, which was of a finer matter and substance that gave us our real forms. We weren't looking through eyes that were foreign or viewing through filters anymore that felt like looking glasses, but we were like emanating this otherworldly kaleidoscope type vision that was tinged with a hope and a clarity. So we saw our end result of the refiner's fire. We perceived why Abba conceals himself in the cloud, wrapping them around himself, because we felt it like a blanket that we longed for that concealed us too, that hid us away from this conspiring world's eyes that just rejected us and felt like it hated us too. Every pain was broke off. Our inner child was set free, and even our inner children actually spoke to us, taught us things in a moment's glance. I shifted into seeing every chain broke off from both of us. Our hearts became unchained. Things that we had waited for and longed for got answered and fulfilled. And a lot of the mysteries of heaven are still concealed. But in the end, it felt like we were making ourselves like flames, like living sacrifices, like the candlesticks that we were carrying around in our backpacks. We needed to keep glowing and burning for a greater work at hand that still wasn't even finished, a greater work ahead, greater rewards to come. And we had hoped that the internet would be used for benevolent purposes in our hands and others, and for ministering and sharing gospel truths, teachings, like an uplink for sounding off the gathering of heaven's armies and events in 2024. But in the end, we felt one, we felt whole, we were one soul unified the way we were supposed to be and created to be. We were separated the next day, though, but the night before we had created like our own like mystical, wonderful world. We had to make crucial decisions. We got transformed internally on many levels. We saw what was prepared for us in the future because we had a good father that never left us for a second. And he turned our epic tragedies into triumphs, derailed all the current systems, allowed global shifts to occur in time spans so that we could come back into acceptance and sustainability and soul integration, back down even to healing the first 8 fetal cells in our tailbone. So you take that leap of faith. You know that God split the sea for our ancestors. He would do the same for you. We knew that we would overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony in the end, whose blood covers all human trespasses. Then outside, Abba told me that he would unlock what was locked within me, like a key code in a moment's time, to reveal his power, honor, glory, and dominion. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Our days are like a passing shadow. We're to lengthen our shadow, look into that, to fear him, make our lives meaningful and purposeful, bear good fruit so we can have a good harvest in the end, and those seeds can grow into trees planted by living water in the time that we're allotted here. He's not subject to the things that we are here, so he always sees things well in advance. Yahushua HaMashiach crossed eternity for us, laid down his life for us. We were given more time extended to us to learn to love ourselves and each other more effectively, regain things we had lost or that were stolen from us. The rewards are great no matter what. He's still a good father. Though you slay me, I will trust in you. He chastens his children, all his sons and daughters. He puts us through the refiner's fire to come out shining and new, bear witness that he's greater, the worst fears earth's ever seen or experienced, and stands above it all. They can be completely set free. Children need to be set free and are being set free right now. All human captives and slaves need to be prayed for. All those who are persecuted for his name's sake. He searches us like a flashlight, burns out the iniquity within us, makes our crookedness straight, or things we assimilated with, or agreements with the enemy he'll make known evident and clear when we submit to him fully. The way becomes clear and evident, and the door to the hope of all glory. I'll not look with approval on anything that's vile. I hate what faithless people do. I will have no part in it. I'll refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. I'll hate all who deal crookedly and have nothing to do with them. I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. Those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe. So just remember all of the scars, all of the pain that came from the time travel program was for a purpose, that there is rewards for these difficult paths. There's an holy end times remnant army. Nothing can stop them. His truth goes marching on. All fractured parts and traumas and wounds are all sealed up in just one of Yahushua's scars. All of that added up that could have just killed most people that they wouldn't be able to handle can fit into just one of the Savior's battle scars and be sealed up in his wholeness. He's already won my war. He's already won your war. And you believe that, you receive it. He's won all of mankind. He's the greatest fighter ever, not the greatest sufferer, who satisfied the wrath of an angry and holy God until he was satisfied to repair the brokenness of this world and return it back to Eden.